I always wanted to serve on a jury.
I'm really super excited to be here, so I really appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Creating this whole trial, Daddy.
I want to give a big shout out to the 13th Jury Podcast and Brandi.
Yeah, I applaud you guys. Keep doing what you're doing.
That every time you run into Phil Barber, you should reach for it.
And then I just look to the jury, and it's sort of like, look.
I was in the eye of the storm, and you guys were watching the storm.
Hey, if you're bored of work, come pop in and say, hey, we'll have some coffee.
You are a ray of sunshine, and I love what you've done with your YouTube channel.
Now can you hear me? Now can you hear me? I'm not muted. I need an interpreter. I'm not muted. Now you can hear me? I don't know why it does that. Because I can look at it and see that I'm not muted, but then nobody can hear me. And also my little thing right here that to where I can highlight all of y'all's lovely comments is not working either. Let me see if I can get that figured out. You know, it wouldn't be a hump day without all kinds of issues starting our morning off, right? Right. What a day. We have a lot to do today, y'all. We have, let me see. Ooh, I bet this is going to fix it. Ooh, look at me being a technical genius goddess. Yep, fixed it. Bam. Bam. I love it when I fix things. It makes me feel really smart. Even though I basically just press buttons until something works. That's okay. Hello. Off to a good start. Off to a good start. I knew it was going to be a good day today because I went to the park this morning. Me and Lucy went for a nice long walk this morning, and I saw some flying areolas. I took a picture. I don't know what I did with my phone, but I took a picture. So I'll have to find my phone in a little bit and show you. So big stuff happening today. So we have a lot going on today. I will tell you, let's see, I have on our docket, we have Brice Rhodes is, here, let me pull this up. Brice Rhodes has his sentencing today. We have that at, I think I pulled it, it's 1:30 Eastern on the docket. Yeah, flying nipples. Oh yeah, let me go back before we move forward. Okay, the flying areolas thing. If you weren't here for that, then that sentence made no sense, and I just breezed on past it like it was nothing. But the flying areolas thing, I had gone to the park. What was it? Maybe was it Monday? Everything runs together, or over the weekend. I don't know. But I went to take Lucy for a walk, and there was this lady, elderly lady, cute as she could be, couldn't hear all that well, you know, but she was just fresh. And I saw her staring at this tree when we were walking by. Like, she was like right on the edge of the sidewalk looking into like these little trees that are right by this pond in the park. And she was like, I walked up, like, she looked over at me when I started walking up with Lucy, you know, and I was like, you know, smiled and waved and like, hey, how are you? It's not even a wave. It's like that, you know, like, and she saw me, she's like, did you see this? Like, talking about the bird. And it's this really cool looking bird with, it's like black and it has like this bright, like brilliant color orange, like just these spots like right here. I have no idea what it is, but it's really pretty. And she was like, it's black and orange. And I was like, oh yeah, it reminds me of Orioles. You know, like the Orioles birds are orange and black, but these had less orange on them, but still it's like the black and, you know, that brilliant orange. And so I thought, you know, like, oh, look at me knowing the name of a bird. And so I was like, oh yeah, it reminds me of Orioles. And she said, areolas? And I was like, Orioles. And she looked at me like I was an idiot. And she was like, no, honey, I don't think that they're called areolas. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. Have a good day. It was like, she made me feel like an idiot, but I didn't say areolas in my defense. But now every time I see those black and orange birds in the park across the street, I am always going to be like, oh, there's a flying areola. So, you know, it happens. So for those of you who are like, what the heck is she talking about? That was it. That's what I was talking about. Okay, so on our agenda for today. Oh, first, thank you, Dino422. I got busy talking about areolas and I showed your comment, but didn't get to say thank you. So thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Oh, and thank you for gifting a membership. It went to Julie F. Julie F, welcome. Welcome to the green side. Thank you so much, Dino420. I appreciate it. And is Weezer in here yet? Weezer, are you here? I got your card yesterday. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Y'all are the best. So me and my kid went to the post office yesterday evening, and so I got your card. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. So back to our docket for the day. Flying areolas everywhere. Spring break, woo! Different kind of flying areolas out there. So today we have the sentencing for Brice Rhodes, and I pulled up the court docket for that. It shows it's at 1:30 Eastern time, so 12:30 my time. Yeah. And we also have I have the Scott Peterson hearing from yesterday pulled up. It's short. It's like 28 minutes. It's not long at all. I've already watched it, but I wanted us to watch it together just because, like I said, it's such a big deal. They had cameras and stuff there, but they did not allow them to live stream it. They allowed them to post the video, you know, share the video after it was over. You know what's funny? They had the judge made a thing that you could have cameras and stuff like that in the courtroom, but anybody who, oh, my neighbors are frying bacon. That smells good. Anybody who had like a camera phone or a laptop with a, you know, thing or anything, anybody that had any of that, that you had to put blue painter's tape over the camera. How funny is that? Random. That's the first for me on court documents. Pillows, thank you for super chat. Tagged you on Facebook jury page. Want to make you laugh. Oh, I'll have to pull it up. I will have to pull it up. Let me. I will do that. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you. And Patches. Happy 10 months. My goodness, time flies. Oh, time flies. It does fly, doesn't it? I can't wait for our first 1 year person. That's going to be real exciting too. Every time I see these anniversaries, I'm like, man, look at us go. Let's see. Okay, where's my group? Let me pull it up in a minute. I just now took my medicine, and if I don't stay on track, then we're going to end up out there searching for areolas and whatnot. I have a few things for us to look at today. So the Scott Peterson thing is one of them. We have Brice Rhodes is another one. And I have the trial that we were doing. I have it pulled up and paused from where we ended yesterday so that we can watch that and then speed trial through that. That one, they talk so slow. And when we got caught up to live and had to watch in real time, I am so spoiled on speed trialing that I felt like I couldn't do it. I could not do it. So we're good and behind on that one now. We have a little bit left from yesterday and then, of course, all day today. So that way we don't have to go through that again. It's slow. Now, when I do the Karen Reed case, when I stream that, because obviously I've been covering that one. Obviously, I'm going to. That one we will watch in real time because it's so huge. Some of the bigger ones like that, we'll do in real time. But I think for most of them, we're going to have to speed trial. I've gotten spoiled on it, and I love it. I think that's all. I feel like there was something else today. Isn't something else today on the calendar? Did we have something else going on? Why do I feel like we do? It's way too slow for all of us ADHD brains. That's what it is. Whew. Too slow. Did we have something else? I'm going to go ahead and start playing Scott Peterson. We have that one's like about a 30-minute, 28-minute, I think, something like that. Here we go.
Good morning, Mr. Peterson. Can you both see and hear the proceedings, sir?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right. And do we have your consent to proceed via Zoom this morning?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So the record should reflect Mr. Peterson has consented to appearing via Zoom. He is appearing electronically from Mule Creek State Prison. Okay, the court had requested counsel to be present this morning for a status conference. There are 3 motions pending before the court. Motion for post-conviction discovery under Penal Code Section 1054.9, a motion for post-conviction DNA testing, and a motion to seal court pleadings that have been filed in relation to those 2 motions. Because we had not yet had a hearing date set, the people's response had not yet been due, so I wanted to discuss with counsel a briefing schedule and scheduling a substantive hearing on those 3 motions. I also wanted there were references in the pleadings to potential meet and confer process between the parties to see if they had had any luck in narrowing the issues that the court may have to decide in terms of discovery and testing. So I wanted to check in with counsel, see where we are with that process, and then we'll move forward from there. So let me start with the moving party. Counsel for Mr. Peterson.
Yes, Your Honor. We did go to the District Attorney's Office in Stanislaus County on February 13th to have a meet and confer. Unfortunately, we were unable to resolve any issues. I do have a letter memorializing the discussions that were had. If the court would like a copy, I'd be happy to provide that. I sent it to the District Attorney's Office on February 24th, just setting forth the issues we discussed and the impasses that we had.
Okay, thank you. Counsel for the people.
Your Honor, we did have a meet and confer, and we are at the position where we intend to file our motion, our responsive motion, and what we need the court's help with perhaps is identifying the date that we begin to run that time. We have 90 days of service.
Hold on just a second, Ms. Slatiger. We're getting a little bit of background. I'm going to mute, or I'm going to ask the clerk to mute Mule Creek because we are getting some background noise. So, Mr. Peterson, if you do need to communicate with your counsel at any point, you can let us know that by simply raising your hand so that we can unmute you. Okay,
doesn't he kind of give you Zachariah Anderson vibes with the ponytail and stuff?
We received the motion with all the attachments on January 9th. The AG's office, which also needed to be served, received the motion with the attachments exhibits on January 23rd. So we will be ready to file our response by 90 days from either of those dates. We're looking at either April 22nd from when the AG was served or April 18th from when we were served.
Okay. And so if that's going to be when you're going to be filing your responses or when you're going to be ready to file your responses, how much time would Mr. Peterson's counsel need to then file any replies?
Your Honor, we would ask for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Can I just inquire, we were given somewhat mixed signals at the meet and confer concerning whether the district attorney's office intends to file a blanket opposition to both motions or whether there are some specific items that they will be objecting to and others that they will not with respect to the discovery motion. So if the court could inquire whether they intend to file a blanket motion opposing all requests or
Yeah, he had a ponytail.
with respect to certain items, perhaps we could begin receiving.
You can see it when he turns his head.
I mean, I would expect that that counsel could handle that in the meet and confer process. So the people are entitled to an opportunity to respond. They can decide what the scope of their response is going to be. If you're going to need 2 weeks to respond to that, then I will set a hearing that contemplates that you will have time to file a reply and I will have time to read all of the pleadings before we have the hearing. So let's see. If the people are looking at being ready to file their responsive pleadings by the 22nd of April, and counsel's going to need at least 2 weeks for the reply, then that would put us with a briefing finishing somewhere around May 6th. So we would be looking at a hearing. I'd like at least 2 weeks to review the last of the pleadings, so somewhere on or after the 20th of May.
Your Honor, if I might,
yes.
In terms of the timing of our response, I was speaking specifically about the DNA motion. That we'll be ready to respond to that on that date.
Okay.
And then we would ask for an opportunity to file a response to the discovery motion as well, and we would ask 90 days from the date we file the DNA motion to respond to the discovery motion.
Is there a reason that you need an additional 90 days beyond for the discovery motion, or why they can't go in parallel, Ms. Vladek?
Yes,
or Mr. Harris?
Yes. As the court may have already seen in the pleadings, the defense pleadings in this particular case, specifically for the DNA motion, is 142 pages of pleadings, plus over 880 pages of exhibits that are attached. The exhibits came to us later than the initial pleadings, and so that's been one of the delays for us, having to go through each of those particular exhibits. The statute for the DNA motion does have a 90-day deadline. The statute for the discovery does not have a deadline. It just has been interpreted by the court to be a reasonable time frame.
Okay.
We think that the DNA motion would also assist, having that resolved would also assist in some aspects as to the discovery motion, because specifically in the statute it says that the two do not work necessarily in conjunction.
Right.
Also, the discovery motion itself is another 62 pages with a large volume of exhibits for that as well. So we've been concentrating on trying to get the DNA motion, which does have the deadline done. A lot of the materials that we will have in the DNA response will be applicable to the discovery, but we just think a reasonable time period based on the size of these motions, it's not unreasonable to ask for another period of time.
Well, I guess the concern that I have about 90 plus 90 in terms of your responsive pleadings is that the Court of Appeal has issued a stay for a relatively limited period of time. We're working on a 6-month deadline before, and I understand that there is the potential for an extension of that deadline if there's additional good cause and not being done with the pleadings here and with the hearings here determining the scope of the discovery would potentially be good cause. But given that they have sort of given us a 6-month time window to work with for what they think would be an initial opening, I'm concerned that setting a briefing schedule for that exhausts the entirety of that time period is not going to be viewed as potentially reasonable by them. So, and these two statutes, while I understand that a lot of the issues may be interconnected with the discovery that...
Yeah, they found, so the day after Lacey went missing, they found a van about a mile away that was like, that whoever had it had burned. In that van, there was a mattress in the back and it had a blood stain on it. So they were notified at the time about this, but they didn't look at it as anything to do with Lacey's disappearance. And the burglary that happened directly across the street, or right across the street in that, obviously same neighborhood right there where they lived, they also said that didn't have anything to do with it. And the police actually they flat out lied to the public, really. I mean, they told, because people were saying maybe that has something to do with it. And so the police said, oh, that didn't happen on the 24th. That happened on the 26th, which is wrong. But also, even like on the original reports and everything says 24th. But then they came out and told the public it was the 26th, which was a lie. But
the defense is seeking, I don't see a lot of what they're seeking in the 1054.9 motion appears to me to be in the nature of file reconstruction. Some of it, not so much, but there are things where essentially they're asking for missing bait stamp numbers and other things that are referenced in reports that they already have. I don't understand why that couldn't be worked on in parallel. That's what I'm still waiting to hear. So if the people want to address that, I'd be happy to hear any argument on it.
Yes, Your Honor. One of the things, as it relates to the discovery motion, there was a couple of issues. One is we believe it to be issue preclusion. For in fact, there has already been a previous 1054.9 motion that has been brought, has been litigated, and resolved primarily against the defense back in 2011, 2012. So because of that, we have to go back and we have to call out what has previously been dealt with, and that's requiring us, again, to go back through things that are not necessarily in their materials, but it's in the court record. We also believe that a lot of these items have been raised and litigated as part of the initial appeal and also litigated as part of the first habeas. So because of that, and unfortunately we will be providing to the court or asking the court to take judicial notice of the petition that was there because a lot of these issues have been raised and have been adjudicated. So because of that, there's a lot of back and forth from the record, and there is going to be a large amount of reading for both sides.
Okay. That brings up another point. The defense did make a request in the initial round of pleadings for the court to take judicial notice of the entirety of the trial court file, the entirety of the direct appeal, the entirety of the habeas proceedings, and all of the Supreme Court proceedings, including all the pleadings. Is there any objection to that request from the people?
There is as to some portions. We have a portion of it in our response to the DNA motion to address that. But basically for the court, anything that is part of the record of the case that has been adjudicated, we have no objections to that being taken judicial notice of because it's the law of the case in a sense. What we do have a complaint about is there's a request from the petitioners that the court take judicial notice of their pleadings in these new proceedings. Those are hearsay, and just because they've been filed does not make them admissible. So because of that, we will be objecting to those portions of their request, but the fact that there is a new petition and the previous court proceedings, those we don't have any objection to for judicial notice.
Okay. The reason I inquired was because since you had referenced that there were other parts of the file that you were going to be asking the court to take judicial notice of, I thought we might be able to get at least some of that out of the way. But if it's going to be covered in your responsive pleadings, I will wait to rule on any request for judicial notice until I see what the scope of the dispute is. All right. So let me hear from the defense on the proposed briefing timing and timing of potential new hearings.
Yes, Your Honor. We provided a very, very detailed informal request for discovery on November 14th, 4 months ago. So the District Attorney's Office has known for 4 months which specific items of discovery we are requesting. We gave them references to Bates pages. We gave them references to where in the police reports the items we're requesting are referred to. We were very, very specific. We spent a lot of time trying to suss out what frankly are very alarming deficiencies in the discovery that was provided to the defense at the time of trial. Those are the items we're requesting. I agree it should not take 180 days for them to locate those items and provide them to us. The defense was entitled to those at the time of trial. Mr. Peterson has been waiting 20 years to find some of these police reports and audio recordings and video recordings that should have been provided. So I don't think that the nature of the requests, it's not a fishing expedition. They're very precise, they're very specific, and we believe that they are probably very easily accessible. So we would ask that they begin providing the discovery that we are entitled to under 1054.9. The prior 1054.9 that Mr. Harris referenced does not include what we are asking for. It related specifically, almost exclusively, to expert materials and other evidence that is not included in our motion. So we are eager to get our investigation underway and completed. The Court of Appeal did give us a very short time period within which to conduct our investigation. The materials we are asking for are reasonable. They're within the scope of 1054.9, and we would like to begin receiving that discovery as soon as possible.
Okay. So in terms...
You know, one thing about this, I feel like because we were not able to watch this trial, we had to rely on media reports for it. So reading over a lot of this stuff recently, like, there are some major issues with it. I think that even the worst of the worst people obviously deserve a fair trial. I'm keeping an open mind about some stuff because there are some things that I genuinely question, but there are some things that are still, to me, I know there's no physical evidence, it's all circumstantial, but there are still, you know, things that even without some of the trial issues that would be really hard for a jury to, and me and most everybody, to overlook or forgive. So if he does get another trial because of all of the issues, it would be interesting to actually be able to watch it this time instead of having to rely on panels to tell us their perception of what's happening.
In terms of briefing schedule, the court is prepared to accept the proposal by the district attorney as far as the DNA testing motion is going. And so the response for the responsive pleadings on the DNA motion will be due no later than close of business, filed and served by April 22nd. Given the timetable that was contemplated by the Court of Appeal and the fact that essentially the discovery request was made prior to this motion being filed and prior to the Court of Appeal issuing their stay on the proceedings to allow these issues to be litigated in the trial court, I am inclined to agree with the defense that a request for an additional 90 days beyond the briefing on the 1054 issues is too long, given the timetable that the Court of Appeal has given us. In terms of the briefing for the 1054.9, because the requests are extensive, it's a 62-page discovery letter with a number of subparts. Some of it is specifically identified by missing bait stamp numbers, but some of it is broader than that. So the court is inclined to go about 30 days beyond the briefing deadline on the DNA motion. And so if I'm looking at roughly the end of May for the 1054.9 reply, could you have it done on or before the 20th of May?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So May 20th will be the briefing deadline for the 1054.9.
Yeah, there's a copy of them. It's like thousands of pages.
All right, and then with the, so if you're looking for at least 2 weeks for the reply, Ms. Mitchell, that your reply will be already done on the DNA before you get the responsive pleadings on the 1054.9. How much time do you contemplate you'll need for a reply on the 1054.9?
We could file our reply by June 3rd.
Okay, so reply pleadings for the defense on the DNA will be due if you're looking for 2 weeks.
They would probably release it after
May 6th.
Like they did with
and reply pleadings for the
Hollywood sex therapist trial and even with this one.
You indicated June 3rd, so that's fine. Motion to seal. That is something that I think we probably can and should do before we deal with the substantive pleadings. And so I did not see a responsive pleading on the motion to seal. How much time do the people think that they would need on a responsive pleading to the motion to seal?
The only issue that we have as to the motion to seal, and this is why we have not filed something, is the documents in question that are being requested. The people have never been provided with an unredacted copy of those reports. We still do not know who these witnesses are. They're anonymous to us. So we're asking the court to order the petitioner to turn those over to us before we can actually decide one way or the other. But the people's position is we probably won't be objecting to the motion to seal based on what's alleged once we have that information.
Okay.
See, this is, Kelly Mack says, I remember when this happened, I could watch live on Court TV while living in Memphis with no problem, but now they block so much here. See, that's the thing, though, is even that with this one, you know, as much coverage, because you're watching live on Court TV, the coverage of this one is kind of how I think most of us got, or on whatever, you know, I mean, all the networks, all the big cable networks and stuff were covering it, you know, 24/7. So that's how, you know, the majority of us got our information, because that's what was around then. You know, we didn't have like how social media and stuff like that, like how, you know, you have like these groups of people that can get together and look at stuff and do deep dives the way that we do. We didn't have that back then. But even with like the Court TV and stuff, nonstop coverage, everything that we heard was still reliant on the people telling it to us, because cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom. So with no cameras in the courtroom, we're still relying directly on the panels that are reporting to us. And I think that a lot of issues came out of that, which is why I think it's such a good idea to have cameras in the courtroom. And I think it creates a level of protection for everybody involved, not just the defendants, but for the, you know, the Constitution, the attorneys, the judges. I think that all cameras, or all courtrooms, should have cameras in them.
Mitchell?
Your Honor, the identity of the witnesses whose names are redacted in the declarations that Mr. Harris is referring to have stated that they are fearful of retaliation by the Modesto Police Department if their names become known, and have asked that their names remain sealed. I would request that we perhaps have a conference in chambers to discuss this issue. It's sensitive to our ongoing investigation. There are a number of other witnesses who we have been investigating who are in a similar situation.
Okay. Well, all I'm asking for essentially is a briefing schedule for the motion to seal. And there's a procedure that's set forth in the rules of court for a motion to seal in terms of lodging a pleading with the court that is the proposed sealing and the narrowly tailored nature of it, and serving it on the opposing party. It appears that that actually hasn't been done in this case. All of the pleadings that were filed were essentially filed publicly, but with the redactions that you are proposing. So in terms of the procedure for the motion to seal, it is, I would say, somewhat unusual given the rules of court. And I anticipate that the parties will not be the only ones who want to be heard on the issue of the motion to seal, given the nature of the case. So let's set a briefing schedule. I'm not going to make any specific orders, and whether or not the motion is compliant with the rules of court and the proposed redactions are within the nature of the rules of court is something I'm going to rule on at the time of the motion, not now when I have one motion, not a response, and not all the pleadings that I anticipate that I'm going to get on it. So how much time would the people need in order to be prepared to file a response to what is in the record?
2 weeks would be fine.
Okay, that's fine. And then any reply that you may have to that, Ms. Mitchell, how much time would you need once you get the people's response?
1 week, please, Your Honor.
Okay, so 2 weeks from today is the 26th of March, so people's response will be due March 26th, close of business. And you said 1 week, Ms. Mitchell, for your reply. That would put it about April 3rd. So April 3rd for motion to seal reply. And we will need to set, let's set a hearing date on the motion to seal, and then hearing dates on the DNA and the 1054.9. The hearing date on the motion to seal can be earlier, so that'll be, we'll do that first. Proposals from council if we're looking at April 3rd for the close of briefing, and the court is going to take, the court will need about a week to review on the motion to seal. So anytime after April 15th is fine. What's council's preference?
We can do April 16th.
So they're setting up more hearings. They have 3 more that are now set up for the future.
All right. Let me just check the court schedule. Yeah, I'm free April 16th, so that's fine.
Which is what they're doing now.
April 16th, 9 a.m. motion to seal. And Ms. Mitchell, is Mr. Peterson going to want to be personally present for that, or continue to appear electronically?
That's a lot.
My understanding is that his preference is to appear electronically, but he can correct me if that is not accurate.
Okay, and can we, let's go ahead and ask to unmute for that.
He looks so different, doesn't he?
Still muted. All right, Mr. Peterson, we're contemplating an April 16th hearing on the motion to seal the pleadings in, or parts of the pleadings in this matter. Are you going to want to appear via Zoom or in person for that?
Zoom is fine, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Then, for hearing dates on the DNA motion and the 1054.9, what's the party's preference in terms of hearing those together or separately?
Your Honor, we would prefer to have the DNA issue resolved as soon as possible, so that if there is going to be testing ordered, we can get that started.
Okay, people? Okay, that's fine. So if the briefing on the DNA motion is going to be completed by May 6th, then, and if I need a couple of weeks to read the pleadings, then we're looking at the last week of May. So any preference by council during the week of May 27th for the hearing
maybe you'll
on the
have
DNA
pigtails
motion,
next
and
time
what
like
is the
Thami.
time estimated necessary for that argument?
We can be available May 28th, Tuesday, May 28th.
That is the day after Memorial Day, so I don't know if that's going to cause travel problems or any issues for the court's calendar.
I don't have any plans on Memorial Day, but if council do and they would prefer to go to the 29th or sometime later in the week, that's fine.
29th is fine.
Okay, and do we think it'll be anything more than a full day?
Don't think it should be more than a full day.
Ms. Mitchell?
Having not seen their opposition, I can't say, but I would hope not more than a day.
Okay, we'll block off a full day for it, so, and it may not take that long, but we'll be prepared if it does. May 29th at 9 a.m. for the DNA testing motion. Then the 1050, and so in terms of the DNA testing motion, Ms. Mitchell, do you know if Mr. Peterson has a preference in terms of Zoom or personal appearance?
I believe his preference is Zoom.
Is that correct, Mr. Peterson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so that'll be via Zoom. Okay, and then we'll need to schedule the 1054.9 hearing. If the briefing is going to close on that on June 3rd, then we will need, if the court needs, that is going to run into some travel plans that I have, and I'm going to need to step off the bench briefly to confirm exactly when I'm returning, because it's an extensive absence in June. So let me step off the bench briefly, consult my calendar, and let you know after essentially when I'm going to be returning and when I will be available for that, and then we'll discuss dates. So we'll take a brief recess.
It's going to show him in just a second, and you can see his ponytail. I'm telling you. Pigtails are for special. There you go. There's the ponytail. I guess, you know, can't get haircuts as easily in prison as, there ain't a Great Clips in cell block D. I think something that's very interesting about this case, look, I will be the first to admit I have hated him for 20 years. Named my kid after Connor. I have, I have hated that man right there for 20 years. First to admit it. However, I will say that I will admit that, like everybody else at the time, because that's all we had, my information came from media, because none of us got to watch the trial. We only got to watch the 24/7 coverage of the trial. And when you start looking at some of the appellate issues and so many of the problems that there were with the jury and with so many things. And then some of the information that was said in the media and given as fact that turns out wasn't true and wasn't in any of the reports and wasn't ever testified to, and things that were spun, it has made me, when I started looking at that, I was like, well, crap. Because I know we've all seen firsthand how media will spin things and they will tell you parts. Look, we saw it yesterday in Karen Reed. We, got out of here. We're like, wow.
In terms
you go on Twitter and it's a whole, like, some people
for the 1054.9 motion.
Some people, it's a whole different story. Like, there are people out there saying, like, oh, defense got, like, the defense had a horrible day in court and stuff. And I saw that and I was like, wait, what? Like, what? Were we watching the same thing? So there are definitely people who spin things. So when I started seeing so many of the issues, I was like, okay, let me put my hatred aside and go into it with an open mind, which is exactly what I'm doing. I'm going into it with an open mind. I am putting my hatred aside and looking at everything factual as what evidence was real, what evidence wasn't, what issues were there with the actual trial and all of that. And I am keeping an open mind about everything and looking at it objectively. Prison ponytails make it easy to hide things.
I'm going to have to go until after July 1st. So, counsel, I'm looking at sometime during, if I'm going to be reading the pleadings after I return, I'm going to be looking at sometime during the week of July 15th. Okay. July 15th, 9 o'clock, and in terms of your client's appearance preference, Ms. Mitchell, also Zoom or in person for that one? Okay. Mr. Peterson, is that correct? Still muted.
It would be irresponsible of me with a platform to not be open-minded, because what I want is justice, even if he's a lying, cheating a-hole.
Okay, thank you.
If he's not a murderer,
last
then that's
housekeeping
different.
matter, the court did, to the court's department email, receive an ex parte communication from apparently some kind of a spectator. I read about one sentence of it, enough to realize it was an ex parte communication. Did not read any further, and counsel have been provided, as I understand from the clerk, copies of that email. Did both counsel receive it? Yes. Okay, thank you. And the court is not going to be reviewing any incoming email to that inbox in the future to avoid that issue recurring in the future. So people shouldn't bother to email. Okay, is there anything else either counsel needs to take up for today's date before we recess?
I have one question, Your Honor.
Yes,
we
Ms.
have
Mitchell.
received a number of inquiries from members of the press and the media asking asking for copies of the motions we filed. We have not provided anything to anyone in the media or the press. Apparently they are not on the court's website, and so I'm just asking for guidance. Is there any issue with us providing the motions, or is the court planning to put them on the website so they are available?
I don't have any plans in that regard while the motion to seal is pending, at least, and I have not made any orders about what counsel may or may not do in terms of their communication with the media.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, if
Yes.
people can make a suggestion, one of the things that Judge DeLuca did during the trial because of the media attention and not wanting to be distracted by additional requests that had come in from the media once a motion was filed, his position was that he would take the motions filed by either side and he would hold them from being put on the website or from public filing until the other side responded, because a lot of times that resolved some of the issues or questions that may have arisen. So we would suggest that might be a possibility here as well.
The difficulty, and I think part of this, Mr. Harris, is that the court's filing procedures have changed since Judge DeLuca was the file. We don't have a lot of control over when things come in now because it's all electronic filing. So I don't actually see it until the clerk's office processes it. So while I appreciate the suggestion,
looks so familiar.
It's not consistent with our mandatory filing procedure. So thank you all. Okay.
She looks so...
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm?
I did not want to see you. You are not what I was watching. She looks so familiar. And I don't know if it's... I don't know why. Okay, so that was Scott Peterson. We have... it's almost 11. I am going to put on our... Oh, Holly Mack, thank you. Thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Jessica M72. Bella. Eileen S. Jenna wrote. Were gifted. Oh, and Todd. Hudak Clement were gifted memberships. Welcome to the green side. Holly Mack, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You the best. You the best. Real quick, before we go into this, I will tell you, I know a lot of people will not reopen their mind for Scott Peterson. I know that. I did a poll on Twitter, and it was made very clear that nobody is opening, not nobody, I won't say nobody, 94%, I think it was, or 96%, something like that, were not open to hearing any kind of new information. But I would like to challenge you all to open your mind and think, what if he is a slime ball and a liar and a cheater and really creepy on TV, but he's not a murderer? What if? And open your mind to look at what they present us. You could still totally dislike him, because I do too. Who's going to cheat on that beautiful woman? Pregnant. And the whole thing about, like, you know, I digress. I was saying something to somebody yesterday. I was like, I'm opening my mind to look at facts, but even if he's innocent, he still ain't never going to get a Christmas card from me. So I will never like him, but I challenge you all to open your minds to look at whatever information comes, whatever they give us. I have started going through trial transcripts and the court documents. Of course, trial transcripts, y'all, are like thousands of pages. So, I like the cost to get them was like over $10,000. I ain't got $10,000 just laying around for court transcripts. So, but I started looking. There's a group who all got together because they had been working on his appeals and wanting to. They believe in his innocence, so they all chipped in and got him. So they were available that way. So I've been going through them and stuff, and I've been looking at some of the appellate stuff, and that's a good idea. Holly Mack, let's do a poll to see if you can be willing to have an open mind. Now, this is not, don't get me wrong. This is not, are you willing to say he's innocent? No. This is just, are you willing to look? Okay, but see, but Teresa, this is exactly what I was talking about. You watched the trial, but you didn't actually watch the trial. You watched the coverage of the trial. So I think for a lot of us looking back, it feels like we watched the trial because we heard all the coverage on it 24/7, but none of us watched the trial. They didn't have cameras in the courtroom, so none of us watched the trial. So that's why I'm saying we have all been ingrained in this for 20 years. We've spent 2 decades hating this man and his guilt. Can we challenge ourselves to be open to hearing what they say and then see if we come to the same conclusion? I am always open. Okay, let's do a poll. Can you be willing to open your mind to look at new evidence? And we'll just leave it at that, to look at new evidence. Yes or no? Some people are like, nope, I ain't going to hear nothing. I get it. I've hated him for 20 years. I'd like to know the truth. If he's just slimy and not a murderer, I'd like to know. Me too. Either way, I'm still going to dislike him. Either way. We only know what the media wanted us to know. Yeah. And people have been telling me about, there's like an A&E docuseries that has a lot of information in it too. And, so I want to watch that. You know, I think the things that he's definitely 100% guilty of: lying, cheating, having an affair, and acting like a weirdo in interviews and stuff. But based on everything I've seen so far, I don't know for a fact if he's guilty of this. So I am open to seeing the information and then, you know, making a decision, because I think that that's only fair. If it were, you know, think about if this was like one of your family members and, you know, yeah, they're kind of a piece of crap, but you know they're not guilty of murder. Wouldn't you want people to have an open mind? I'll have an open mind. I'll listen to what they say and then make my decision. But he's still a lying cheater. So there's that. Open. Open your minds. I think that even disliking him as much as I do, with me having a platform where I'm talking to other people about this stuff, it would be irresponsible of me to not, you know, to not have an open mind. I think that a lot of times when you're hearing people, and I know Nancy Grace is like the main example of this because she's the main one who reported on this, and you know, she's a former prosecutor, so she reported on it as if she were, you know, prosecuting the case, not as a person who's just looking at facts. And there were some things that she got wrong and then didn't correct herself when it was proved that it was wrong. So things like that. And then like somebody mentioned, like, you know, the Johnny Depp trial and how skewed those reports are, and the fact that none of us watched that trial. As much as we all remember back thinking, oh, I watched that trial, none of us did. There were no cameras in that courtroom. We watched the coverage of that trial, but we did not watch that trial. So I'm open. You know, we'll see. His fishing story was not believable. See, this is one of the pieces of information that I think is not weird at all. Going fishing, it is not, to me, that is believable. I mean, her, and everybody's like, it was too cold. Nobody would have gone fishing. Her stepdad went fishing that same day. So there are some things that I think are not really evidence. Most of the evidence that people seem to focus on are the bodies, of course, coming up in the bay, which, if y'all read these court documents about the testing of the size of the child and stuff, okay, so in the court documents, they said that when the prosecution had their expert come out and say, we measured this bone, and based on the formula from this specific doctor, that means that the baby died on December 24th. So that actual doctor that they used that formula for said that they did it incorrectly, and that's not the formula that's not how that formula should be used, and that it should never be used on only one bone. It should be used on as many bones as possible, and then you take the average. And when that doctor who had that formula that the state expert used actually did it properly, it showed that the baby would have been, and they did it with multiple bones instead of just the one, but it showed that the baby was likely like January. There were all different dates in January, which would be which would lead them to believe that that somebody took Lacey and kept her alive for a while, which that piece in and of itself is something wild you would never hear about, on Nancy Grace. But there's just things that I am kind of shocked to hear and read in the documents that are just wild. It's wild. Plus there's stuff about, like the jury. Oh, I'm not even going to get into the issues of the jury right now because I know we got other stuff to watch, but there's so many issues with the jury and how all that went. There's actually a quote on the website of Scott's appeal thing. It's a quote from a judge that said something like, with all of the issues in this case, if there's a conviction, it will be like an appellate lawyer's petri dish or whatever. So, which I thought, kind of sums up when you start looking at how many actual issues there were with the trial. It's pretty interesting. Still ain't gonna like him. But I will keep an open mind. Not a fan of Nancy Grace. I personally avoid her. I met her in person, and she's very nice in person. She's very, very nice in person. But when she is on air, she is very much prosecutor Nancy and not like nice mom Nancy or anything, And thank you for the super chat. Thank you. Hello, Brandi. Thank you for explaining. Thank you. It's funny. I was talking about this, and I'm like, for the people who are very, very adamant that mind is closed, I'm not listening, I've been playing the devil's advocate, like, he's innocent and this shows it, and he's innocent and this shows it. Now, am I convinced? No, but I enjoy playing devil's advocate. But I with the people who are convinced he's innocent, I've kind of done the same thing. Like, well, those, like, he had a concrete anchor and, stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting debating it out on both sides and, hearing what people have to say. But you'd be surprised on my poll on Twitter, when I asked, because I was asking people, like, what evidence was it that really stood out to you, and whatever, you'd be surprised how many people said it was because of his affair or because of the way that he behaved after, like how he acted weird in the interview and stuff like that. And keep in mind, those can be reasons for us to dislike him or to not trust him, but those are not reasons to make him, like, to convict him of murder. You know what I mean? But it's interesting to look at this case based on what I do now and how much time we spend doing this and how we see how people can twist things and whatever. It's interesting to look at this with what I do now as opposed to how I just accepted all of the media stuff back then, so it's different. All right, I am going to get us going on this. I have a very important and exciting phone call that I'm about to take. Wish me luck. And I am going to play this so y'all can watch this, and I'm going to mute myself. This is catching us up from yesterday.
Call them the lawyer questions that I have to ask you. Or are we looking at in that exhibit?
We're looking at a bullet hole in a piece of wall, and we're also looking at the blood spatter on either side of the hole. And the blood spatter, the fine particulate area, is consistent with what we term a cough.
Okay. And is it high? Is it a higher velocity,
Yes.
low velocity?
It's high velocity. High velocity, very small particulate matter, very consistent with a cough.
What I want to do now is ask you sort of I'll call them the lawyer questions that I have to ask you. Do you have an opinion with a reasonable degree of medical certainty as of the cause of death of Lisa Bunce?
Yes, multiple gunshot wounds.
Do you have an opinion with a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the manner of death?
Yes, homicide, death at the hand of another.
Thank you, Doctor. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Cross-exam.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So you testified with regards to the toxicology of Lisa Bunce, right?
Yes.
You're not a forensic toxicologist, are you?
No.
You've never testified as an expert in the field of forensic toxicology, right?
Au contraire. Yes, I have.
Okay.
The toxicologist is the one that prepares the analyses, but we interpret the analyses as forensic pathologists.
Well, you utilize the toxicologist's information to come up with a cause of death. You're not actually a toxicologist, right?
I said I'm not a toxicologist. I'm not the one that actually performs the analyses.
Right.
We rely on the laboratory analyses to render an opinion with regard to what those analyses are.
Right. In fact, the blood tubes that were sent out from Lisa Bunce and the eye fluid, the vitreous humor fluid, was sent out to a Dr. Bruce Goldberger, correct?
Correct. He was the toxicologist at the University of Florida that we use for our toxicology analyses.
And Dr. Goldberger, who is a toxicologist, then tested those fluids and determined what, if any, alcohol or other substances were in those fluids, and then reported back to you his findings, correct?
Yes.
And in your findings, do you know or do you recall where the blood was taken from the body?
The blood is taken from femoral on either left or right, but a femoral vein, and it's from the Organ Procurement Agency.
Okay, the femoral vein, which would be in the leg?
In the groin, yes.
All right. And from the procurement agency, from
Lifelink?
Lifelink?
Yes.
So Lifelink would have taken these vials of blood from the vein in the leg?
Yes. Standard procedure.
So when you received the body to conduct a forensic pathology exam, pathological autopsy exam of the body had already been
Long bones had been donated by the family.
right, so the body did not come to you from the crime scene itself, right?
Well, it came to us from the crime scene and then went from our office to Lifelink after Lifelink had contacted the family, and the family had given consent for the donation.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. So the body is taken from someone that works for your agency, your office, is transported to the medical examiner's office, right?
Yes,
And then the body, you're not doing an autopsy at that point?
that's correct.
The body then goes to LifeLink?
That's correct.
Where is LifeLink located?
LifeLink is located in Tampa,
And where's your office located?
Winter Haven.
All right, so it goes from Kane City to Winter Haven to Tampa, right?
Yep,
And then back to Winter Haven.
correct. Happens every day.
So when you receive the body,
Bless you.
the body had already been various sutures, cuts, and what have you, and organs had been
No
removed.
organs.
No organs, just the bones, the long bones?
Just the long bones, just what you saw in that photograph that Mr. Johnson put up there, which are the incisions that are made on the lower extremities. And as again, the family consented for long bones to be donated for postmortem use in living people.
Prior to the body being sent to LifeLink, do you give any instructions to them as to what not to do to the body in order to preserve?
Yeah,
It's evidence, right?
Yeah, there's certainly, that's why the hands are bagged, the hands were still bagged there, in that, so they know that they don't touch wounds. So they're not in the area that are associated with wounds. By the time the body comes to us, law enforcement crime scene has already done what they need to do, so that then once, as I said before, the family makes the decision to donate, and the donation takes place.
Well, you would agree with me, some of those sutures that are on the legs of that body were very, very near to various wounds that were pointed out by the prosecutor?
No, I wouldn't.
No?
I wouldn't agree with you on that. What Mr. Brandi talked about were the wounds that are intermediary targets, the small abrasions and that, but they're not near the gunshot wounds.
Did you recover or take out any glass that was on the body?
I don't recall.
In the body?
I don't recall. No.
Would you have notated that in your autopsy report,
If
your
we saw
findings?
it, yes. If we saw it, yes.
So gunshot wound A, you indicated in your report that was a distant range. And my question for you is, what in your mind is a distant range?
Well, what in my mind is the same as every other forensic pathologist's mind, and that has to do with the distance of muzzle to target. So the muzzle target distance, in order to be a distant wound, is beyond 2 feet. Closer than 2 feet, the muzzle target distance, there are materials that come out of the muzzle of the gun that make their way onto the target, in this case skin, such as powder, soot, stipple, which is burned and unburned gunpowder. There's none of that present on the body. So because of that, we call it a distant wound, indicating it's beyond 2 feet.
So it's beyond 2 feet, could be 10 feet,
Sure,
right? Could be 15 feet?
Absolutely, could be across the room, across the street. Yep. That's why it's called a distant wound.
Fair enough.
I believe all of them are termed, with the exception of D, which is an indeterminate range, same thing as a distant wound. There's nothing on the body that says to me that I can give you an estimate of range of fire with various muzzle target distance. Beyond that, there's no evidence of close range firing, close muzzle target distance, so we call it a distant wound or an indeterminate range.
And as you sit here, you cannot tell us which one of those wounds were inflicted first?
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Redirect.
Briefly. Doctor, the wound that penetrated the chest cavity, you described it going through the outside of the left arm, the intermediate target, and then into the chest. How long would one expect to live with that degree of wound?
Not very long. It produces damage. That is, wound B produces damage to the pulmonary artery, the left atria, and auricle of the heart. So those are pumping chambers of the heart, as well as within both the left and right lung. So, just maybe a minute or two, a couple of minutes.
Okay. Would one be expected to be able to move around freely in that circumstance with that mortal wound?
Well, it's not going to be immediately life-threatening, like snap your fingers, like a wound to the spinal cord would be, something like that. So yes, as long as there's still the ability to pump blood, oxygenate your brain, and you can still move around as a result of that. But I don't think it's going to be a long period of time.
The other wounds, however, were not fatal wounds, at least within that short period of time.
That's correct.
And that wound, the fatal wound, came from the left side, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So if Ms. Bunce was in the closet with her left side facing the closet door, that would be consistent with that?
Yes, it would.
As opposed to leaving a room from the right side where the other injuries occurred, right arm, right hip?
Yes.
Now, as far as the harvesting of the lower long bones, I heard the question, well, the body goes from Haines City to your office to Tampa, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about the importance of harvesting an organ or a bone and the time in which it is actually feasible.
Well, it's certainly feasible within the first 24 hours of death. It's certainly.
Sorry. I was overruling the objection and I coughed and wasn't sure.
It certainly happens within the first 24 hours after death. And it's something that I said earlier, we try to make a good situation out of a bad situation. So we allow for the Organ Procurement Agency, in this case it's federally designated, it's LifeLink of Florida, they operate out of 14 counties in West Central Florida. They're designated by the Department of Health and Human Services to do this, to obtain organs and tissues for transplantation purposes. There is a dearth of organs and tissues for transplantation. People die on the waiting list to have transplants. So we are very proactive with LifeLink in allowing them to make an approach to the next of kin, to talk to the families about someone who has died. Will they be receptive to their loved one being a donor?
And I guess the bottom line to my question and to this line of questioning is, did the fact that Lisa Bunce's body traveled to Tampa to undergo this LifeLink procedure, did that have any effect whatsoever on either any aspect of the autopsy?
None whatsoever.
And you said this is something that happens all the time?
Happens all the time. Happens every day of the week.
Thank you, Doctor.
Is Dr. Nelson released?
Yes.
Ms. Toomey?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next witness.
Shalom Tarak.
Step up here, raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Please. Step here.
Good afternoon. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Shallyn Tork. That's spelled S-H-A-L-L-Y-N. Last name T-O-R-O-K.
Thank you. And where are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office.
And in what capacity are you employed?
I am a firearms analyst in the forensic laboratory.
Now, how long have you worked for Hillsborough County in that capacity?
For approximately a year and a half.
Prior to that, where did you work?
I worked for the State Lab, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I did that for 18 and a half years in the same capacity. So I was a firearms examiner for them as well.
Now, could you tell us a little bit about what a firearms examiner is?
My primary duty is to determine whether or not fired ammunition components came from a particular firearm.
Now, you say fired ammunition components. Could you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Sure. The unit of ammunition, or round is what we're calling it, that has two parts that will leave marks or have marks left on them from the firearm. So it's generated by four parts. There's the cartridge case, and that is kind of what we call the Tupperware that holds the other parts. There's the primer on the back, which is the ignition source. There's going to be gunpowder in the middle, and this is when the primer is struck. The gunpowder will then get ignited and cause an explosion, and then that will propel the bullet out to its target.
Okay. So you've described to us that the bullet, if you will, a lot of people just call it a bullet for common terms, but that's made up of different components that you just described for us.
Correct.
So there's the part that comes out and goes flying through the air, and what do you call that?
So that's called a bullet or a projectile.
All right. Then there's the Tupperware that you call it, which is where all that stuff is kind of stuck into. What is that professionally called?
A cartridge case.
And you said there's something inside of that?
There's gunpowder inside of that.
And then there's, what was the thing that ignites the gunpowder?
It's a little primer, a little disc on the back of the cartridge case.
Okay. So there's a primer, a cartridge case, gunpowder, and then finally the bullet.
Correct.
Now, what about, well, I'll get into that in a second. So tell us a little bit about, your background in doing this. What type of training and background do you have to perform this job?
I have a bachelor's degree in forensic science from the University of Central Florida. I also have a master's degree in forensic science from the University of Florida. While I was with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, I completed their 18-month-long structured training program. This is about firearms identification. So this dealt with subject matter such as standard laboratory practices and techniques, microscopy, photomicroscopy, firearm and ammunition identification and recognition, serial number restoration, and muzzle-to-target distance determination. During that training, I also had to tour many of the major firearm manufacturers in order to learn about all the manufacturing processes that go into making the firearms, which is what makes my job possible.
Okay. So you have this educational background and training. Let me ask you this, as far as your experience, how often over the last, 18 and a half years with FDLE and now a year and a half with Hillsborough County, how many times have you performed this type of analysis regarding a firearm or ammunition?
In the thousands.
Okay. And have you ever had an opportunity to testify and render an opinion with regard to your findings?
Yes, I have.
Have any idea how often that has happened?
Approximately 82 was my last count.
82?
Yes.
Okay. In addition to what you've described as training in the past, is there any sort of program or continuing education that you have to go through in order to maintain proficiency in your particular area of expertise?
Yes, there is.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So we have some external proficiency tests that are given to us by an outside department. It's called the Collaborative Testing Services. And what they do is they will generate a test. It'll have known samples. They'll either be all cartridge cases or all bullets. I do not know the answer. I'm given the test, and then I have to take the test, complete it, and then send it back to the company, and then they'll determine whether or not I made the correct response.
Okay. And have you consistently done these, quality control training tests throughout your career?
Yes, I have.
And are you current and up to date with the latest testing and proficiency that's required by your agency?
Yes, I am.
So what I want to ask you about now is to try to explain to us, when you talk about comparisons and these different things, what is it? And I suppose it depends on the case, but what is it that you're able to compare to determine if a particular projectile or casing was fired by a particular firearm? What are the tools, and how do you figure that out? Explain that to us.
So the basic principle behind my science is that a harder object is going to mark a softer object. So the harder object we have here will be the firearm, and that's going to mark those softer objects, that bullet that has like a copper jacket, or the cartridge case which has a brass casing. Copper and brass are both very soft in comparison to, say, like a steel barrel inside a bullet. So that is what allows me to do my job. When I'm looking at things, the first part that I will look at is I'm looking at something called class characteristics. And so if I have a firearm and I have components in front of me, I'm then going to be looking at these class characteristics. These are characteristics that are specific to a group of firearms, and they're determined prior to the manufacturing process, so in the blueprint phase. So if you can think that I have 3 red Ford Mustangs, the fact that they're made by Ford, the fact that they're Mustangs, and the fact that they're red, all of these are class characteristics. There's several cars out there that have these similar characteristics. So once I determine that my class characteristics are similar, I will then move down to that individual level, that microscopic unique marks. And these happen during the manufacturing process of the firearm, as well as during just regular use and abuse of that firearm. So if we go back to those 3 red Ford Mustangs, now I have one red Ford Mustang that, let's say, has a crack in the windshield and a ding in the front quarter panel. Well, now that red Mustang is now unique and different from all other red Ford Mustangs. So that is what I'm allowing myself to look at when I'm using my comparison microscope. So I'm looking at these class characteristics and these individual characteristics that were left by a firearm.
Okay, and thank you for that. Class characteristics versus the unique or specific characteristics of a particular red Ford Mustang. Now, you talked about a ding in the front and a crack in the windshield. What types of things are you looking at to make a particular firearm beyond the class characteristic? What types of things are there in the firearm, either in its manufacture or in its function, that create that crack in the windshield or that ding on the bumper?
So when the firearm is manufactured, that's where these first will come up. So you're going to have these really hard steel pieces cutting and turning and making the firearm. And every time they're turning and cutting, they're going to have metal chips. And each one of those metal chips will now start to also chip away at each different part. So the more it's manufactured and the more it's used, the more these parts get individualized, as we like to say. So what I'm looking at is once I see that my class characteristics are the same, I'm then going to start looking at the individual characteristics. We like to say that it's similar to like a fingerprint or like a signature. So every gun has a unique signature or has a unique fingerprint. So depending on what I'm looking at, so if you want to say, let's talk about projectiles, I'll be looking for a series of striations, which are just like a series of lines or scratches. You can think of like a UPC barcode. The UPC barcode for Cheerios is not the same as Frosted Flakes. They have different lengths and widths. They have different peaks and valleys. It's the same thing. So I'm looking at these striations. When we transfer back to, let's say, the cartridge case, I'll be looking at things such as what's left a mark on that primer itself, and that's from the actual firing pin hitting that primer to detonate that cartridge, the primer hitting back into the firearm, because remember, there's a huge explosion. So the cartridge case is expanding and shooting back against the back of the firearm, and then the bullet is going in the opposite direction out. So the marks for the bullet are coming from that barrel as it's spiraling down that barrel and being propelled out that barrel. And then the marks in the cartridge case are coming from the inside of that firearm. So again, it's expanding and it's hitting and it's picking up all those marks, as well as there's also, depending on the gun, you can also have like a little hook that'll pull it and then pull the casing out, which you've seen in movies where you'll see the brass casings when they get ejected out. So there's parts in there that will also pull that cartridge case out and eject it as well, and those can also leave marks.
Now, these marks that you're talking about, are these visible with the naked eye?
Some are visible, but most I have to look at with the microscope.
Now, you talked about this manufacturing process. So in my mind, I'm picturing a conveyor belt with a bunch of different gun barrels or a bunch of different gun frames rolling on down the Smith & Wesson line, and they're all being drilled out by, being drilled out as they go. Are you telling us that if I have gun serial number 1 and gun serial number 2 or 3 consecutively in there, that each one of those guns, Smith & Wesson as a class characteristic, would have different microscopic nicks in them that would make them unique?
Yes, and I know this because during my training, we've purchased consecutively manufactured barrels. So we've gotten 12 barrels that are right off the line. They've been cut in size, and then we test fired all 12 of the barrels, and then we were able to see whether or not you could determine that barrel number 12 and barrel number 1 were different, as well as if you could ID the bullets back to each barrel. And I was able to ID the bullets back to each barrel. So even if they are made one right after another, because you have such hard metal and all these pieces coming together and all these metal chips, they're individual right off the floor, right off the factory floor.
So let's, and I'll break it into 2 different parts. There's the barrel of the gun, and then there's the mechanism of the gun, the firing mechanism. When it comes to the barrel of the gun, what are some class characteristics, and how do you determine individual characteristics when it comes to the barrel of the gun, which I assume would involve the bullet, the thing that flies out and hits something? What do you look at there?
The first class characteristic is going to be the caliber, and that's just the size of the bullet. So some common calibers would be like 9mm Luger, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 Auto. And basically that's just going to be the diameter of the bullet itself. So you can think of like a penny versus a nickel versus a quarter. They have different diameters. So the 9 would be smaller, then your 40, and then your 45. So once I determine what the caliber is and make sure that the bullets that I have could actually have been fired or actually fit inside that gun, I then will look down the barrel itself to see what kind of rifling it has. And rifling are just spiral grooves that are cut or impressed into the barrel, and it gives what they like to call gyroscopic stability, which is just a big word to say that I put a spin on something and it'll go farther and faster and more accurate. Kind of like if you throw a football. If you put a spin on it, it'll go farther, faster, and more accurate. So each type of manufacturer will have a certain number of rifling that they will put into that barrel. So some will have 5 lancing grooves cut and spin to the right, and some will have 6 lancing grooves and spin to the left. So those are some of the class characteristics that I look at. You can also measure those grooves with the microscope to see the widths of those. So some might have a 6 right, and then another company has a 6 right, but then the widths of those lancing grooves will be different. So those are the class characteristics that I'm looking at. Once I determine that those class characteristics are the same, by using my comparison microscope, which is basically just 2 microscopes that are linked by one optical bridge so I can see 2 different specimens together, I then start looking for that signature of that, or that fingerprint of the bullet itself to see if that will match what I have in my case. So I'm looking for that UPC barcode, those striations.
And when you talk about that, the striations of that UPC signature, the specific class characteristics, what are the types of things that you're going to see different between the same manufacturer with the same lands and the number of lands and grooves and the same measurement? What are you going to see that's going to separate that from a class characteristic into a unique specific characteristic of that particular firearm? What is it you're looking at?
So if you're looking at, let's say, the land impression will have 2 shoulders, and inside that shoulder you would actually then see your UPC barcode. And what that looks like to try and give, I don't know if you can remember back in the day we used to have globes, and you'd have the smooth globe, or if you got the really big globe and it had like the topography, we could have the mountains were all poking out on the globe. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking at a UPC barcode, but it's more in a 3D dimension. So we're looking at the different peaks, the ridges, the valleys, how far those lines or striations are spaced from each other. So once I put it up to my microscope and I see that I have all, let's just say 6 right bullets. So they all have 6 lands and grooves and they're all spinning to the right. And then I put them up together and I say, oh, the limps and gimps are also the same width. So these 2 shoulders match up with these 2 shoulders. Now there's where my class characteristics pretty much stop. I then start to look at that microscopic barcode and start to look and see how that pattern is going, like how far they're spaced apart, the height, the width, the depth. So you're looking at 3-dimensional objects, and it's a 3-dimensional pattern is what I'm trying to represent.
And with regard, and I'll ask you about this in a second when I get to the frame and the firing mechanisms, but with regard to the barrel and the lands and the grooves and this type of science, is this something that's been around for a while?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea how long? It's obviously been as long as you've been doing it.
Yes.
But does it go back historically?
Yes, it's over 100 years old.
Okay. And are you aware of any 2 firearms in the course of your training, your experience, ever being exactly the same?
No, I am not.
Are you aware of anybody who is aware that two guns were identical?
No, I am not.
Now let's talk a little bit, we've talked about the barrel now and these lands and grooves, both the class characteristics and the individual characteristics, those barcode differences in there as they kind of relate to a bullet, because those impressions would arguably be impressed onto that soft metal or jacketing of a bullet. Let's talk about the action or the firing mechanism of a firearm. In this case, we're going to talk about a Glock, but in general, a semi-automatic weapon. Or I guess even a revolver when it comes to the firing pin. Tell us what you have with class characteristics and or individual characteristics when it comes to that part of the gun.
First, I'll explain how it works so that way you can understand where some of the marks on the cartridge case are occurring, since it is happening inside the firearm. So when you have a firearm, the first thing you're going to do is in the grip, typically they'll insert a magazine. We're talking about a semi-automatic, specifically a Glock, let's say. That's going to house our ammunition or our cartridges. So you will put that into the base of the gun, and then you will have to manually pull that slide back. Now what that's doing is it's going to pull back and it's going to, in essence, cock the firearm, okay? Then when I release that slide, it's going to pick up a cartridge out of that magazine and it's going to load it into the barrel. And as the slide comes completely forward to meet with the frame, it's going to lock. At this point, it is locked and ready to go. That's why they say locked and loaded is some of the terminology that we use. So at this point, that means it's ready to fire. So the next step is I will pull the trigger, and when I pull the trigger, it'll either release the hammer or release the striker, depending on which type of firearm, and then that striker or firing pin will then hit that primer, and then it'll cause the explosion, and then the bullet will go down the barrel, and as that's happening, once the gas pressure has decreased, then the slide will be pushed rearward from all of that gases, and as it's pushed rearward, it's going to pull or extract that cartridge case from the chamber, and then it will eject it out of the gun. At this point, the slide has gone back, it has recocked, and then on the forward motion, it'll pick up another cartridge and be ready to go. Some of the class characteristics that I look for on that cartridge case would be from that firing pin itself when it hits that primer. Firing pins will have different shapes. Some can be rectangular, some can be circular, some can be oval. And then within that firing pin itself, there'll be specific marks. Some can have shapes. We can go back to some even having those striations. So those are like the individual and class characteristics within that. The other portion that you would look at is that primer. When that firing pin is hitting it and it's causing that explosion, that cartridge case itself is going to slam back into the breech face. And as it slams back into that internal portion of that slide, it's picking up marks from that slide. And these are called breech face marks. These, again, have different class characteristics. We can do parallel, we can do shape, we can do crosshatch. So there's many different types of shapes that you can see or different styles. And those class characteristics, again, would belong to a unique group of set of guns, but they're not actually individual until I look at them in the microscope.
So if I could, now we do have a firearm that I'm going to ask you about, and it's been secured. The bailiff has talked about it, and I'm going to put in front of you for the record what's been introduced into evidence as item or exhibit number 260. And I'm going to point it, even though it's not, even though it's inert and it's all got a lock on it. And if you could kind of show, now we can't slide the slide back because it's safe, but some of the things that you've just described, and I'm also going to put in front of you exhibit 261 kind of demonstratively. Here's the clip that would go into it. So you just described the function of a firearm like that. Could you kind of point to what you were talking about? You did a good job moving your hands and stuff, but as far as how that works, maybe we could kind of visually see what you're talking about.
So this right here is our magazine, and this is where you will put your cartridges. There's a spring-actuated magazine follower, and you just load the cartridges in here. Think of it kind of like a Pez dispenser, so when they're getting unloaded, it's just pushing them out from that magazine. The magazine then is going to get inserted into this portion here, this grip portion here, and then now the firearm has ammunition, so now you can load it. You will then pull this slide back, so when you pull this rearward, it will then cock the firearm, and then upon its forward motion, it's going to actually strip a cartridge out of the top of this magazine, and then it will feed it here into this chamber, which is kind of that recessed spot you can see here. And the chamber is actually directly connected with the barrel. Now the slide has moved completely forward, touching that chamber, so now it is locked and it's ready to go. The next step would be to pull the trigger, which is located behind the trigger lock right here. So I would pull the trigger. That then is going to release the firing mechanism, allowing that firing pin to come and strike that cartridge. And then the little explosion occurs, and then the bullet would travel out of the barrel, and then the cartridge case, which is in the chamber, will begin to get extracted and ejected by this rearward motion. So you pull it back, you release it, you fire it, the slide then comes back, a little hook will then pull that cartridge case out, and then there's another little stick next to it called the ejector, and he kicks it out. So then that cartridge case flies out, and then the gun, as the slide is pulled back, it's recocking, forward motion again, picking up another cartridge from that magazine, and now it's ready to go.
All right, and I'm going to put Exhibit 4 up on the screen, which is the same firearm. What we see in front of you is the weapon as the slide is forward, as if perhaps there was a round in the chamber ready to fire. you talked about the slide either being pulled back to cock or automatically cocking back and forth based on the explosion of the bullet going out and the cartridge being ejected. Is this the position, essentially, of what you've described here when it's not in that position?
Yes.
Okay. Is this also a position, when else does this position occur where the slide remains locked back in this particular firearm?
So there's two ways. You can manually do it. You can pull the slide back, and you can see there's kind of like a shiny square right in the middle below the slide. That's kind of seen out. That's called a slide. Perfect. Yes, that's called a slide lock stop. So you'll pull it back, and there's a recess in the slide, and you push up, and then that will hold the slide open. The other way that this works is once you have used all of your ammunition. So say you have 7 rounds in your magazine, and you fired it 7 times. After you fired it 7 times, and the magazine is empty, there's a little lip on this top of this magazine follower here that once it's empty, this little lip will actuate, and internally it takes that square slide stop and pushes it up and locks it open. So it's a sign for the shooter that you are now out of ammunition. So you'll put your ammo in here, you fire the gun, and then once you've run out of ammunition and your magazine is empty, the gun will automatically lock back and stay in that position until you close it or put a new magazine in.
Okay. So with the clip, and can you tell from this photograph, which is Exhibit 4, can you tell if the clip is in by looking at the photograph? Can you tell that the magazine, I should say, I call it a clip, the magazine is in this weapon?
It is.
Okay. And the fact that this slide is locked back, is that consistent with your explanation that there's no more ammunition in there unless someone has pulled it back and manually locked it?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And assuming hypothetically that there was actually no ammunition in there, the way that would normally happen is the gun would run out of ammunition and lock itself back.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you told us about the individual and the class characteristics of the barrel and the marks that it may make on a bullet. And you told us about the workings, the firing mechanism, and the class characteristics and the individual characteristics as far as that section of the gun. When we talk about the barrel and the rifling, normally what component are you going to compare? What part of that bullet or that cartridge casing, or that I call it a bullet, but the thing you stick in the gun, what part of that are you going to be looking at when it comes to the projectile?
So the projectile itself, I'm going to be looking at the outer portion of that projectile, so the outer portion of that bullet.
And is what you're looking for is a possible correspondence with the barrel end?
Correct.
Now, when it comes to the casing, with the part that holds the primer and holds the powder, what part of the gun are you going to be looking at for any potential comparisons in that regard?
So with the cartridge case, I'm going to be looking at the firing pin impression, so when it actually pierced the primer and what shape that is, plus what patterns inside that, as well as this front portion of the slide we call the breech face. So remember that primer is going to hit back on that with all that pressure, so I'm looking at the marks that the breech face allow on it, as well as the marks that are along the outside where it actually has expanded against that chamber.
Okay. So if I was to take a cartridge casing or a bullet, and would you be able to, if I had an entire bullet, would you be able to compare the projectile to the barrel and the casing to the firing pin in that area?
Yes.
So you'd actually have 2 different things to look at from the same firearm.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what I want to ask you about is, in this case, what were you provided to look at and try to compare?
So I had the submitted firearm. I also had 5 cartridge cases, fired cartridge cases, and then 2 projectiles.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, in this case, with the bullet part. So what I'll call the bullet from this part out the barrel, lands and grooves, the things that you've described that the bullet will pick up, both the class characteristics and the unique characteristics. So in front of you, and I didn't memorize the numbers, I apologize, I have in front of you what's been introduced into evidence as State's Exhibit 260, the magazine, which is Exhibit 261. And then I also have projectiles, 279, 278, and 280. So were you provided, and we'll get to the other stuff in a minute, but were you provided those items for comparison?
These two have the unique FDLE case number, the exhibit number, and the, in my handwriting, located here on both of these. This item does not have any of my markings on it.
Okay. So that one was one that you were not provided with?
Yes, State Exhibit 280.
Okay. And that is a piece of cloth?
Yes.
That was associated with a bullet, but you can't test a piece of cloth?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to put that one to the side. So let's talk about the other two. First of all, how is it that you can test to determine whether or not one of those two projectiles, well, first of all, let me back up. Do you need a projectile that has a certain amount of substance to it in order to compare? In other words, if it's too damaged, if I took your red Mustang with the crack in the windshield and I brought it to the auto crusher and he smashed it into a million pieces, and you really don't know what kind of car it is anymore, you can't use that one.
Correct.
Do bullets come to you in that particular form, metaphorically?
Yes, they can.
Okay. And if you actually, so I guess what I'm asking is what kind of, or what degree of completeness do you need in order to test whether or not a bullet has been fired through a particular gun barrel?
Depending on the type of the bullet, I'm going to need the outermost portion of that bullet, and that's going to be what actually is touching that barrel inside. So, for example, in this case, I have two projectiles. One of them I know is a jacketed hollow point, which just means that it has a copper jacket that has a lead center. So think about an M&M. The hard outer candy shell is our copper jacket, and then the lead center would be our chocolate. Well, that lead center is not going to touch anywhere in that barrel because it has its copper jacket on. So all of the markings that I want to look at and that I need for my analysis would be on the jacket. If I were to, let's say, just get a lead core, just that center part, then I wouldn't have any information on there because, again, it did not touch any part of that barrel. So that would be something that would be limiting.
So sometimes you are you provided with bullets that are useful for analysis, and are there times when you are provided bullets that don't have any value as far as comparison?
Yes.
All right. And in this case, is that kind of what we have?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So explain to us the difference between what you were provided in these two bullets and what type of analysis you could or could not do with each one of them.
With both of the bullets, I still have to figure out, regardless what type, whether it's damaged or it's intact, I still have to fill out a comprehensive worksheet. And this is just going to be based on physical characteristics. So I'm going to be looking to see, what type of bullet is it? Is it a jacketed hollow point? Does it have a copper jacket or a nickel jacket? Does it have a steel core or a lead core? And I'm just doing basic observations. I'll then also weigh the bullet itself because that'll help determine what caliber it could be. And I also take measurements of the diameter, because again, if we go back to that nickel, penny, quarter, they all have specific diameters. And then I'm also going to look at the number of lands and grooves and then measure those as well. So when I get into specimens such as this, I then will fill out that comprehensive worksheet. Number 14 for me, which is State's Exhibit 279, when I was filling out that worksheet, I determined that it was a jacketed hollow point bullet, and it had both the jacket and the core intact. When I examined number 15 for me, but number 278, State's Exhibit, it was just a lead core. So again, it was just the center of that bullet, and it did not have the jacket on it.
Okay. So when it doesn't have the jacket on it, the exhibit that you just said, it was your item 15, that was not useful for comparison based on not having that outer candy coating on it.
Correct.
The M&M coating.
Yes, it did not have any marks that I could use in order to compare to the firearm.
Now, the other bullet, and both of these Dr. Nelson just talked about in autopsy, this one bullet, Exhibit 278 from the pelvis, that was not useful.
Correct.
But the Exhibit 279 from the pass through the chest, that was one that was useful.
Correct.
So tell us what you did and what you determined with regard to that projectile, that bullet.
So after I did my comparison, just of looking at the worksheet itself and then looking at the bullet, and I wrote down all of the notes, I then take any of the physical characteristics and I then will see if they match the submitted firearm. So when I work up this firearm and I produce those test fires from the firearm, I'm going to actually have bullets and cartridge cases from this gun itself. So I'll receive this gun, I do a comprehensive worksheet, then I take it into my water tank and I'll shoot it typically 4 times. And I'll get 4 bullets and 4 cartridge cases.
Okay, well, and that's exactly what I want to ask you about. So you, in order to do this, you actually shoot something from this same firearm yourself.
Correct.
Now, in so doing, does that help you, A, determine whether it actually functions?
Yes.
Because a gun that doesn't shoot probably wasn't used. So you actually do test fires.
Yes, I do.
And that's to recover bullets and or casings that you can microscopically compare to what was submitted to you.
Correct.
All right. I'm going to show you in just a minute what's previously been marked for purposes of identification as State's Exhibit 277. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to ask you to take a look at that and tell me if you can identify what they are.
So again, it has the unique FDLE case number, the exhibit number, and my initials and my handwriting with the date on all of the packaging and the items themselves. And these are the 4 test fires that I collected and generated when I was test firing this firearm.
All right, so let me ask you a little bit about test firing. Now, the bullets that you have that were sent to you for comparison from the morgue were taken out of somebody's body. And is there some damage to the bullets just from that act of going through some sort of a target?
Sometimes there'll be damage, sometimes not. It just depends. In this particular case, it did have some damage.
Okay. Now, your test fires, assuming you don't run around and shoot at things that will damage a bullet, what's the methodology behind a test fire where you can keep the casing and keep the bullet and use it to compare without damaging it?
Once I have looked at the firearm itself, I do another comprehensive worksheet, and that's just make, model, serial number, information like that, the safeties on it, and whether or not I can get it to function without live ammo. Once I determine that it's safe and that it can function properly, I will then take it into the range, and we have a water recovery tank, which is basically just a huge steel tank that has a porthole, and you will put the firearm in there, and then you will fire the gun. So I typically fire 4 times, which is what I did in this case. The bullets themselves will go into the water tank, and that water will rapidly slow those bullets down. So that way they're not hitting the side of the tank, they're not hitting each other, and then that keeps them in a pristine form. The cartridge cases itself, because we're dealing with a semi-automatic handgun, those are going to be ejected out of that firearm. And the tank that I use has a mesh net outside of the porthole, so as I'm firing and the cartridge cases are leaving the firearm, they land into that net. So I'm able to collect the 4 cartridge cases and the 4 bullets that I actually made with that firearm.
And is Exhibit 277, are all those in substantially the same condition as when you recover them from the water tank and the mesh net that recovers the cartridge casings?
Yes, they are.
This time I'd ask that States Exhibit 277 for identification be admitted as a full exhibit.
Any objections?
No objection.
It will be received.
Now, when you make your comparison to the from the fired test fired bullets in this case, and I'm sticking with the bullets right now, we'll get to the casings in a minute, were you able to look at the 2 of them simultaneously? That is the one that was submitted from law enforcement to the one that you test fired, and what were you able to determine, if anything?
Can I refer to my notes?
Absolutely.
So both the test fire and the States Exhibit 279 bullet, both of them were 6 right, which means they had 6 landing grooves cut into that barrel with a right-hand twist. They also were both of the correct caliber, so they were a 38 caliber family, which means they could be 9mm, 38s, 357s. So those measurements were correct. And then once I determined that those class characteristics were similar, meaning that this fired bullet could fit and work inside that firearm, and it had the 6 landing grooves with the right twist, I then moved down to the microscopic level to look at that individual characteristics or the signature that was left on my test fires versus the signature that is on the submitted bullet.
And what were your conclusions?
I determined that this bullet was fired from this gun.
Okay. And to what degree of certainty do you normally use in order to make that determination? What are you comparing microscopically?
So what I'm looking for is the actual repeatable pattern, as I keep saying, but you have to have certain quality and quantity within that mark. So if you can kind of think of like remember back in the day we used to have the stamps, and so you would do an ink stamp and then you would stamp and stamp and stamp, and as you got farther and further down the line of the stamp, you could lose some of that clarity, some of that quality, and you might not get the whole entire picture. So not only are you looking at the quantity of what's left in that stamp, but you also want to look at the quality of the marks itself. So the first thing I have to do once I see that this has a particular pattern, I have to then judge how much of this pattern is actually good quality and quantity. And if I decide, yes, this firearm is marking very well, I then move and I look over here to see if this also has the same quantity and quality of marks. Once I determine that the quantity and quality of marks is there, I'm then simply just trying to match up 2 patterns. So I'm trying to match up 2 UPC barcodes. And so I'm trying to see if they have the same spatial width, the same dimension, the same height, width, and then I'm looking at that, and once I determine that this does have the same pattern that this has, I can then conclude that they came from the same source or came from the same firearm.
And in this case, did you determine that that bullet marked as State's Exhibit, and I didn't memorize the numbers here, 279 was indeed fired from the firearm that you were provided as State's 260?
Correct.
Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to move ahead to the casings. And thank you. And I'm going to show you 5 exhibits that have previously been put into evidence And in no particular order, 263, 262, 276, 274, and 264. And I want to ask if you can take a look at those and if you recognize what they are.
Yes, again, they all have the unique FDLE case number, the exhibit number, and my initials and my handwriting on both the outer, inner packaging and the items itself.
Now, looking at FDLE items number 4, 5, and 6, those happen to correspond in our case to markers in the front of the house 3, 4, and 5. Not that that matters for your analysis. But now I'm going to ask you about the casings, because now I'm going to talk kind of about the, I'll call it the back part of the gun. We talked about the barrel and the bullet, and you indicated that it is your opinion that that bullet was fired from that firearm. Now let's talk about the casings. You talked a little bit earlier about how you're able to determine whether or not a casing is fired from a particular firearm. With regard to those 3 casings, our kind of our front yard casings, what did you do in this regard with your analysis?
So I filled out a comprehensive worksheet for these items. And they have a little bit different as far as their head stamps. So they have 2 different brands of head stamps. One is federal and one is CBC. But other than there being different brands, they're similar in their caliber. So they're all 9mm Luger caliber, which means they could be fired by a firearm that uses 9mm Luger caliber ammunition. As far as the other class characteristics that you would see microscopically, they had parallel breech face marks. So again, that primer, when it hits back, it picked up the parallel marks off of the front of the slide. It has a D-shaped firing pin, which just simply means the firing pin actually has a flat back and is shaped like a D. It also has shapes within that firing pin, which are similar. And then it also has a teardrop aperture, which basically is the hole that's in the back of the firearm where that D-shaped firing pin comes out. It's actually shaped like a teardrop. So all of these 3 cartridge cases, they all have the same class characteristics. They all have parallel, D-shaped, shapes within the D-shape, teardrop, and 9mm Luger.
Okay. Now, did you go further and look at any individual characteristics that may tie those 3 cartridge casings to that firearm?
Yes, I did.
So tell us about that.
So in this particular case, what I use for my identification, I look at the entirety of the bullet, and then I'm looking at the patterns within the breech face marks, the firing pin impression, the firing pin marks itself, extractor and ejector, the chamber marks. Once I've looked at all of that, I then will start comparing it with the marks that I found on these cartridge cases that I actually made with the firearm. So in this particular case, I utilized a portion on the cartridge case itself called the firing pin aperture shear. And if we go back to that teardrop, which is your firing pin aperture, and so then your firing pin actually comes out of that, the shear itself happens when the firing pin hits that primer, and because of all that explosion, that primer actually goes back into that little bit of that teardrop shape, so it goes back into the firing pin hole. Then when the firearm itself is moving rearward, in order for it to unlock, the barrel drops down ever so slightly, and that actually does nice scrapes with the tool mark. So now that barrel took that cartridge case and it scraped it down on top of that slide itself. So those are the marks that I actually used for the cartridge case for identification.
All right. And with regard to those first 3 that have been listed by FDLE at the time, 4, 5, and 6, corresponding to our markers 3, 4, and 5, do you have an opinion on whether or not those casings were fired from that firearm?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
I determined that these 3 cartridge cases were fired in this pistol.
All right. Now, I'm going to ask you a few more questions about that in a minute, but let's go to the closet casings, which are State's Exhibits 276 and 274. So I want to ask you a little bit about the same thing that I asked you about the first ones. What did you do with regard to analyzing those 2?
So again, I filled out the comprehensive worksheet. I had one that was federal brand and one was CDC brand. Other than that slight difference in the brand, again, these were all 9mm Luger caliber cartridge cases. They did have the parallel breech face marks. They had that D-shaped firing pin with the shapes as well as that teardrop shaped aperture.
Okay. And you have an opinion on whether or not those two shell casings, or cartridge casings, excuse me, were fired from that firearm?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
These 2 cartridge cases were also fired in this pistol.
All right. Now, I want you to take a look at the cartridge casings, the ones you just talked about. And you mentioned that there's 2 different brands, correct?
Yes.
All right. One of them has a goldish color casing, correct?
Correct.
And what color is the other color casing, if you were to look at it?
So we have gold and we have silver.
All right. What are those casings made of?
Typically, the gold will be made of brass and the silver will be made of nickel.
Okay. Are they both used in firearm ammunition manufacturing?
Yes.
And you've determined that those 2 casings were fired from that weapon. The brand doesn't matter as long as it's the right caliber ammunition, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. The same question for, I'll call them the front porch ones. You indicated that there were 2 from one manufacturer and 1 from another manufacturer.
Correct.
Again, one color casing is what?
Silver.
And there's another one that is?
Gold.
All right. But if you look at all of them, are they made up of 2 different brands collectively?
Yes, I had 3 federal and 2 CDC.
All right. Now, does the brand have anything to do with your determination, other than acknowledging that there are different brands of ammunition? The fact that one is one color and one is another, does that have anything to do with what you do as far as the microscopic analysis of whether or not those casings were fired from that firearm or not?
No, it does not.
Have you seen cases or been asked to analyze cases where there is multiple brands of ammunition being fired by the same firearm?
Yes. So not only do I see it in cases where people will just have different brands of ammunition. Some people use the same brand. Some people just use whatever they have on hand. And then also for my personal use, which every time I test fire, I also will test fire both brass and nickel. And I do this so that just in case there might be an issue, not necessarily an issue, but some metals will pick up better marks than others. So I always want to make sure when I'm test firing that I have a good representative sample. So the most common materials we see are going to be brass and nickel. So I always want to fire 2 brass and 2 nickel in order to see that best repeatable pattern.
So you telling the folks in the jury that your test fires, Exhibit 277, the ammunition that you used in the water tank, is also composed of 2 gold-colored ones and 2 silver-colored ones, brass and nickel?
Yes.
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, I'm happy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Y'all are nosy.
So your specific forensic discipline is basically pattern or tool mark identification.
Correct.
Would you agree? And the tool being the firearm, right?
Yes.
And your job is to match the firearm, if you do have a firearm, to a specific casing and or casings that you're provided from law enforcement.
It's to determine if they can be. It's not, my job isn't to actually make the match, it's to determine if they can be matched to one another.
Fair enough. And in this case, you were actually provided with a firearm.
Correct.
And multiple casings, spent casings.
Correct.
What's the difference between a spent casing and a casing if there is one?
There's no difference.
No difference, okay. Are you familiar with PCAST?
Yes.
All right. So then you would be familiar with the fact that PCAST in 2017 had indicated that the scientific validity of feature comparison methods, which is what you're doing, has not or falls short of the criteria for foundational validity.
Yes, the PCAST came out in 2016, so it was about 8 years ago, and it was a study that basically was saying that even though we had over 100 years of research, what they deemed to be scientific valid, they wanted to have a specific type of research done. And the research that they wanted done was something that they like to term a black box study. So in 2016, they produced this report saying, hey, they're not saying that we're not a valid science, but they're saying in order to be in what their term of the scientific validity, they would want to see more research done and more government funding done so that we do these black box studies. They're called open studies. Since then, the field itself has done several of these black box studies, and all of them have proven that firearms is still a valid science.
So when you say they, we are talking about the President's Council of Advisories on Science and Technology, correct?
Yes, we are. Yes, that's what an acronym stands for, yes.
All right. And they haven't retracted that report by the President's Council of Advisories on Science and Technology, correct?
It wasn't retracted because they just wanted us to perform more research, which is what we did.
All right, and that was in 2016 and 2017, essentially indicating that there was a lack of foundational validity in the pattern and or tool mark identification, that forensic field, if you will.
Correct, because we did not have the black box studies, which we have since done, at least on hand, I know of 6.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Do you know how many studies have been conducted to validate the field of ballistic examination?
My last count was 6.
All right. And which studies are you familiar with?
Okay, so there's one, it's Keisel, I believe, or Keisler. I believe that was in 2018. There was a Jamie Smith project. I believe that was 2019 or 2020. And then there was the AIM study, which was in 2020. That might have been 2021 as well, and that was done by the FBI. Those are the 3 that I can pull out of my memory.
All right. And tell us, if you can, or if you will, I'm sure you can, what type of methodology do you use, or did FDLE use, when you conducted your analysis in this case?
As means, what do you mean by methodology?
What scientific method did you use?
The scientific method.
Which is what?
The scientific method, which is where you have a hypothesis, you state your hypothesis, you then perform your experiment to see if you can prove or disprove your hypothesis. So all forensic science is based upon the scientific method that we used for our science projects when we were in elementary school.
Okay, but is there a specific name for the methodology that's used in forensic ballistic examination?
So that is just pattern matching, is what is a very simplistic way of saying the type of methods that we do, because that's what we're using is pattern matching based on that tool mark principle where a harder object marks a softer object.
Are you familiar with AFTE?
Yes.
What is that?
The Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners.
All right, and is that an association that has created a methodology to do what you're testifying here today?
Yes, I'm actually a member of that association, and yes, there is the AFTE. It's the same training that we provide to all firearms examiners.
All right, so what methodology is associated with that association that you belong to?
Pattern matching.
Which is what?
Which is matching patterns. So it's the same thing I'm saying. So yes, that's what I do. I match patterns. So you have fingerprints, you're looking at fingerprints and comparing fingerprints to fingerprints. If you have signatures, I'm comparing signatures to signatures. So it's a comparative science. It's not an analytical science in the sense of chemistry, but it's a comparative science.
It's a subjective science, right?
Portions of it are subjective, correct.
Well, all of it is subjective. It's not objective, it's subjective, and that's one of the reasons why the President of the United States took issue with this type of forensic discipline, right?
Incorrect. So subjective means that it's based upon your opinion. Objective means that someone can go behind me and do the same thing I did. So when you measure something, that's very objective, okay? So I can go and I can measure the base, and I can say it's 0.355. Someone else can come behind me with a micrometer and measure the base and get 0.355. Then a person can also weigh the bullet. That also is objective. That's something that someone can use a tool and find the same exact answer that I have. After that, after we're looking at these subjective portions of it, that is where it comes to recognizing those patterns. That's where my training, my knowledge, my skills and ability, and having over 20 years in the field, that's where it comes into play. So I can look at patterns and recognize what actually constitute an identification, or I can recognize what something would constitute an elimination, saying that it wasn't a specific gun. So I have training on both of those ends of the spectrum.
And would you agree with me that Glocks, that specific make of firearm, is one of the most popular types of guns in the United States, or in the world, actually?
I can't testify to that.
All right. Well, you testified earlier that you went to numerous manufacturing places.
Correct,
right?
yes.
Did you go to Glock's manufacturing?
No, they do not allow people into their system.
They don't. So you did not go to the Glock manufacturing system?
No, I did not.
Even though there's one in Georgia, right?
Yes, there's one in Georgia, but they do not allow tours.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about class characteristics. What are class characteristics?
Class characteristics are the measurable features of a group source. So that would be like the rifling, the 6 lanes and grooves with the right twist, the shape of the firing pin, the size of the firearm.
All right, let's talk about the first 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case. What was the specific class characteristics about, and I'm looking at FDLE item number 4. Tell us what the specific class characteristics are.
It is 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case. It has parallel breech face marks. It has a D-shaped firing pin with shapes within the firing pin, and it has a teardrop-shaped firing pin aperture shear.
And are you reading from your bench notes?
Yes.
All right. And what about FDLE item number 5? The 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case. And is there a difference between that plus P that you used in item 4 versus item 5?
Yes, a plus P just means that there's extra powder within that particular cartridge. So there is standards as to the amount of powder that can be in a cartridge. Once you go outside of that realm and you get a little higher, so you have a little more powder, a little more power, a little more pressure, they require you to put a plus P on the head stamp.
So are you saying that the first cartridge case that we were speaking about had more powder, had more gunpowder in it?
Correct, yes.
Than the second one, which would have been FDLE item number 5?
Correct, yes.
Is that because they're different types of ammunition or something different?
It's just whatever that manufacturer wants to load their cartridge with.
All right, so tell me who was the manufacturer of that first one-fired 9mm Luger caliber plus P
The plus
cartridge
P
case?
is by a company that is known as CBC.
And then FDLE item number 5, who was the manufacturer of that cartridge case or that projectile?
Federal.
FC?
Yes.
And what about item number 6, that 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case?
Also federal.
And then FDLE item number 12, the fired 9mm Luger caliber plus P cartridge case.
That's a CBC again.
And what does CBC stand for?
It's Cartridges de, it's in Spanish. It's Cartridges de Brazil Cartuchos. I'm sorry, I'm very bad at that. But it's a Spanish company, I apologize. That's why it's known as CBC. It's easy for firearms examiners to just say CBC.
So it's a Spanish manufacturer type of ammunition?
Yeah, it's just what the company, yes.
Is it a common type of ammunition?
CBC, yes, that's a common brand, yes.
What about FC? Is that a common brand of ammunition?
Federal is also common, yes.
All right, and then the one fired, finally, looks like you had 5 cartridge casings that you looked at. The one fired 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case, that would be a FC as well?
Number 13, yes.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so specifically, I want to start again back up the list with item number 4, that plus P, that CBC cartridge case. Tell me what specific individual characteristics that you deemed to be unique to that cartridge case and that firearm.
So like I explained with that firing pin aperture shear, so what really makes that unique is that during the manufacturing process of that slide, you will have a tool that actually will cut down and saw off that front of that slide, and so that's going to leave tool marks going in this direction. The next tool will then come inside, and that's actually going to drill that hole. So now you have a tool that's making marks in opposing directions. So now you have tool marks going this way and tool marks going this way. That's why it helps to make it very unique, because you think about it, if I'm scraping something like this with metal fragments, it's going to draw all the fragments down this way. And so now I have this nice kind of like gradient scrape pattern, like think like you cut butter, you can see those knives, the little tines, the little teeth on the knives, and make a nice mark. Now I'm going to take a spinning item and I'm then going to spin into those, and now I'm going to make that firing pin hole itself. So now I have tool marks made this way with rough metal, and now I have rough metal that has been spun in many different directions. So that's why the firing pin aperture shear is a great area to make an identification on, because you have 2 different patterns that are then making the pattern that this gun will make. So within that firing pin aperture shear itself, I have a nice series of stria or scrapes on that pattern, which are actually causing all the peaks, ridges, and furrows, and making that pattern that I can see matches this one on the firearm.
Okay, so specifically with regards to item number 4, what were the individual characteristics that you noted in your benchmarks that matched or were consistent with the marks from the firearm?
So that was the striations that I saw within the firing pin aperture shear.
And how many striations did you see?
I do not count.
Is there a magical number that you use? What if you only saw 1 striation mark?
It depends on if there's marks within the striation mark.
Were there marks within the striation marks?
In this particular case, there was just a pattern, a series of striations.
But we don't know how many striation marks created that pattern that you're talking about.
Correct, yes. You're looking at the overall pattern itself. You need both quantity and quality.
And you can't give us the quantity?
It's not part of my exam to actually count every fine line that I see, no.
All right, so you cannot give us the quantity, correct?
Correct.
And then you said something about quality.
Yes.
So you can't give us the quantity, and you also cannot give us the quality of those striation marks on that specific cartridge case.
The quality is basically looking at the marks itself. So if you go back to that stamp analogy, so like if your first stamp might be nice, clear, crisp pattern that you can see, and then the next one going down the line might be more blurred or phasy, or you might not be as deep or as depth. So that way I'm not getting lights and shadows onto that pattern. So instead of looking at something that's 3D, the quality might have only maybe be able to see it maybe at a flattened or two-dimensional. So I need to have enough dimension in there, 3D, enough quality in order to bring up that pattern and allow me to see with all the different shapes and valleys that are going on that topography. So that's why we need the quality. We need to have that depth so that the microscope can shine light and allow us to see. And then we also have to have the quantity. So you don't just want to have one line. That obviously isn't making a pattern. We all know what constitutes a pattern. It's several things repeated over and over again. So that's what I'm looking for, quality and quantity.
All right, so let me go back to the pattern. You said several things repeated over and over, but you can't tell us what those several things are. Well, you can describe what those are, but you can't give us the specific number of items that you look at to form that pattern, right?
Well, I look at everything on the cartridge case. So I'm looking at all the information that's on the cartridge case, whether it be on the sidewall, from the extractor, from the ejector. That whole entire cartridge case, I'm evaluating. I'm making sure that everything has the same correspondence, everything's in the same relative position. So like if my extractor is up at 10 o'clock on this gun, the little hook, when it pulls out my cartridge case, I have to make sure that on these, that extractor is also in the 10 o'clock position. So I'm making sure that everything has the same relative spatial relationship to each other. So I want to make sure that my extractor is in the same spot, that that teardrop shape is exactly where it's supposed to be oriented. And then from there, I move down to areas that I'm going to use to take, say, like a representative photograph so that I can use that for my recollection purposes. But I'm looking at the entirety
Let me
of the cartridge
stop here. I appreciate all of the information that you are giving us, but I want to talk specifically about this case, not generalities, this specific case. So with regards to FDLA item number 4, were you able to obtain sufficient quality in order to do a microscopic examination?
Yes.
And what about the quality of that specific cartridge case can you tell us?
So the quality of it had enough quality where the firearm had, this particular firearm had left enough marks or enough depth and spatial relationship of those marks itself. So when I was able to look at my test fires, I could see the quality and the quantity of marks that this particular firearm had and any pattern that it was producing onto those cartridge cases. So this is my known source. This is ground state 0. Once I am making samples from this, I then can look and see exactly what type of pattern. I can see how many, I can see the depth, I can see everything in that pattern. And I fired that 4 times and I'm getting that gun to repeat 4 times. So I get 4 times the repetition on the cartridge cases and 4 times that repetition on those bullets. So now once I've looked at those bullets and I've looked at those cartridge...
Let me stop again. You said enough marks on the casing. I'm asking you, what specific marks did you see and how many marks are enough?
Right, but in order to explain that, I have to explain that when you're working with this gun, I am then being able to reproduce and see exactly what marks it's reproducing in that pattern, whether it has good quality and good repetition. So this gun had good quality marks and good repetition. Once I look at that, I am then going to move to these samples to see if they have the same quality and they have the same repetition. So by seeing the quality and the quantity of the marks that this gun is leading or having, I then can compare to the quantity and qualities of marks of this. Once I determine that the same quantity and quality of marks that are on this firearm are also on this, I make my conclusion, and that would be an identification. Now, if they were different, I would then have to make an elimination.
Sure. So as you sit here, can you tell us about the quantity and the quality of the marks between that firearm and specifically FDLE item number 4, that cartridge case?
The quantity and the quality of the marks are of sufficient agreement so that I can say that this gun fired these components.
Well, what is sufficient agreement, I guess is what I'm getting to.
Okay.
Are the number of marks?
It's both quantity and quality. So if we talk about sufficient agreement, I apologize, it's going to get in the weeds for a little bit. When I was in training, we had to shoot samples from known matches. So I would take a gun and I would shoot it over and over again. And then I would look to see the amount of marks that were similar. So I would look to see the quantity and quality of marks from a gun that I know had and shot those same components. Once I determine that now is where I need to be. That's sufficient agreement. So when I see that much similarity coming from a gun, I then know that that's in my identification zone.
And that's my question for you, is what in your mind, in your subjective mind, when you were doing this analysis, is enough, sufficiently enough?
Right.
To make that agreement.
Right, in order to explain.
Okay, so I've missed everything. We're talking about... I can't even focus my mind. We're talking about the gun marks. So I'm assuming that this is the witness who was telling them that the bullets matched that the bullets came from his gun. Is the defense attorney now trying to dispute that? Because no, that's not really up for debate, right? I mean, I guess they have to try to pick whatever holes they can, but is that it?
Sufficient agreement, I then also have to talk about known non-matches. So now I took 2 guns and I fired it, and now I take those components and I know they came from a different gun, and I'm looking at that to see how much quantity and quality will repeat. So in this case, you're going to have your differences outweigh your similarities, and over here, your similarities are going to outweigh your differences. So that's the range that you're looking at when you asked about sufficient agreement.
But you're not really giving me a range. You're talking about generality.
Also, we have about 15-20 minutes until Brice's sentencing.
And you're not giving me any information. Whew. You're giving me subjective phrases and terms. And my simple question for you is, what was the sufficient agreement for you regarding that firearm and not exhibit, but FDLE item number 4, which enabled you to come here and give an opinion to indicate that that was sufficient enough to have identified that cartridge case to that firearm.
Right, so the firing pin after shear impression that I have from this firearm, when I compared it to the firing pin after shear impression of all these 5 cartridge cases, there was sufficient agreement within that pattern of quantity and quality.
So you cannot answer what was the sufficient agreement between that firearm and all of those cartridge cases?
The sufficient agreement was that the patterns matched.
What was it about the patterns that matched?
The spatial relationship of the patterns, the shape of the patterns, how when I took 2 of them and I lined up, I could take my center line, I could move it this way and that way, and everything lined up like a pattern did. They were matches.
This is, I'm just going to put this right
You
here
still
so we
haven't
can
answered my
watch.
question, but I'm going to move on. Would you agree with me that nickel and brass are different metals?
This is Brice.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Do you know which one is a more softer metal?
It depends because they're not always 100% homogeneous. So sometimes you'll have brass mixed with other metals and nickel mixed with other metals. So it depends on the brand and it depends on the manufacturer.
All right. Based upon this or these 2 manufacturers, do you know whether or not the nickel was harder than the brass?
I can't answer that because they use different brass and nickel all the time. So whoever they can get the cheapest or whatever deal they have going on, they change their makeup all the time. So it's just a generality saying something's brass or nickel, but this could have some tin in it, this could have some tin, this could also have some brass and nickel in it. They change all the time with ammunition factories. They're not consistent.
All right. Would you agree with me that the type of metal for that specific cartridge case could produce maybe, I don't say different markings, but maybe not as many markings as maybe potentially another cartridge case may because of the type of metal that you're analyzing?
The type of metal can affect how a tool leaves the mark, correct, yes. And that is why I test fire nickel and brass so that I can see what this gun does when it test fires nickel and what this gun does when it test fires brass. That's why I want to do that. I want to make sure that I have a representative example of what I have in my case. So I have brass and nickel here, so I'm going to test brass and nickel there in order so I can see if perchance that pattern might change from brass to nickel. And in this particular case, it did not change from brass to nickel. The metal did not have a factor on whether or not it was repetitive.
Now you talked about individual or unique characteristics. Aren't there also unique characteristics that go along with the manufacturing process itself?
You're talking about during the manufacturing process?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Did you look into that with regards to conducting your analysis on these 5 different cartridge cases?
Yes, before I test fire, these cartridges would come from my stock ammunition. So before I test fire any of the ammunition, I take it first and I look underneath my microscope. And I want to see if there are any manufacturing marks that are on those particular cartridges before I actually make my samples with them. Because again, those can actually hinder what we're seeing underneath the microscope. So I'll take my samples, my exemplars, I look under the microscope. Once I've done that, I then will label them with a number, and then I put them in there, and then put them in the gun, and then those are the 4 that I will use for my testing.
Okay, so I guess I'm kind of confused. You did 4 test fires, right?
Correct.
Used 2 different types of ammunition, correct?
Correct.
How many of the cartridge casings that were provided to you did you examine against the ones that you had fired?
All of them.
All of them. Okay, that's what I thought.
Ms. Toomey?
Yes, ma'am.
If you need
I'm
to-
sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm not going to cut you short, but I do need to give everyone a break. So about 10 minutes.
All rise, please.
Yes, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. It was a great call. It was really exciting. It's some cool offers, but I haven't signed any contracts yet, and I still have there's more meetings. So it's still very just early. It's just really exciting. It's cool to even, to even be approached and to even know that, that like people all the way out in Hollywood have listened to my Conspiracy in Canton series and think it's really good. Even though Coffin Daffer didn't like it. She said it's terrible. You know what? That's a good point though. Coffin Daffer, even if the contracts are terrible, maybe I'll do it anyway just for never mind. That's just petty Betty coming out. Cool. We'll see. We've only got like 20 minutes left from yesterday's court. OG 80s man says he's my lawyer. Maybe we'll get through most of this before Brice's.
Please be seated. Ms. Jimmy, you may continue.
So let me just start with, I asked you about the PCAST report, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And you had indicated that there had been several reports since that PCAST report that came out, and one of them being one that you're familiar with, which was done by the FBI.
Yes, correct.
Right? All right. And in that FBI report, we talked about subjective versus subjective. One of the things that they were wanting to do was to make pattern analysis, ballistic forensic analysis more objective as opposed to subjective, individual, right?
Are you talking about the study or are you talking about PCAST?
The study. Okay. The study that came after PCAST, based upon PCAST.
The black box
right?
study, yes.
And several of the things that this study wanted firearms examiners and independent researchers to do was to create some type of automated or computer-based objective determinations. Basically, use a computer, use something that's automated as opposed to just the human eye using a double-sided microscope. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware that that was the purpose of the AIM study itself. I'm aware that there are some people that would like to see a more statistical-based analysis similar to DNA. I know that that has been brought up before.
Right, and this is the FBI, right?
Yes, there's other places that have brought that up as well. I'm not sure about the AIM study. When I took the AIM study, I participated in that. I did not, that wasn't one of the things that we were told to do during our testing.
Well, that was one of their goals, I guess is what I'm saying, is to create something that's automated to make it more objective as opposed to subjective. In addition to that, the FBI also wanted there to be more statistical evaluation methods used in the identification of tool marks. Do you agree?
Again, I don't have the AIM study in front of me. The portion that I participated in, I don't recall statistics being involved in the testing that I did. And
in addition, finally, and we'll get to that we'll get to it now, that the error rates in that statistical automated objective methodology also be reported. That was also one of the aims for the FBI.
Yes, was to have an error rate, correct, yes.
Now, what is your error rate?
So error rate in accordance to like my proficiency testing, which I do yearly, my error rate, I've always passed my proficiency.
Okay, so, and how long were you with, I was gonna say, okay, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
18 and a half years.
All right, and you get tested once a year?
Just for that specific proficiency test, correct, yes.
Okay, and you've not always passed your proficiency tests?
I have passed all of my proficiency tests.
Oh, you have passed them all?
Yes.
All right, and they're given once a year?
Yes, it's required at least once a year, correct.
And is it done internally or from some other agency?
An external source, the Collaborative Testing Services, they make the test and they provide the test, and then the test is sent to us. We don't know the answer, we just get the test, we complete the test, and we send off our answers, and then they let us know if we're correct.
And you've always passed?
Correct.
So your error rate is 0?
For the CTS testing, correct, yes.
And when I say that your error rate is 0, that's virtually impossible, right?
If we're looking at my testing on the proficiency test, it would be 0 because I've always gotten everything correct, so that would not be impossible.
Well, you would agree with me that in everything in life and in everything in science, there is always a margin of error.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yes.
So in this specific analysis that you conducted, what margin of error was used?
What do you mean?
Well, there's always a plus or minus as to what the true opinion is, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what would you say, because again, it's subjective, would be your margin of error in the report that you documented?
So with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, as well as with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, we are an accredited laboratory. And what that means is that we have an outside body that comes in yearly and they check and make sure that we are following their guidelines as to what a forensic science laboratory should do. So they have a set of standards that we must follow. Then they also will make sure that we're following whatever our personal standard operating procedures are per each agency. So they come in on a yearly basis and they will actually grab files that we've done. They check and make sure and verify that we're doing everything correctly and that everything is sound in these files in our casework. Now, with that, to be accredited, you also have to have a checks and balance system within your laboratory. And so that's quality assurance and quality control. So anytime you would have an error, it would then have to be reviewed. And they'd have to review whether it was a typographical error, or like whether you just transposed numbers, but all of that is reviewed and all of that is recorded. Anytime an error is made, it is sent to the accrediting body, and then they will then determine what occurs when an error is made. So in both of my laboratories, I have quality assurance and quality control. So once I have come to the conclusion that I had made an identification, it then has to go through a verification process.
All right. So basically, FDLE has various standard operating procedures and quality assurance procedures that are in place, and they have those in place for every forensic discipline that is within their agency, correct?
Correct.
As well as your agency now that you currently work for, which is Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office?
Correct.
All right. They have their own set of standard operating procedures and quality assurance and things of that nature.
Correct.
And the accrediting body that you speak of, what body is that?
So it's ANAB, American National Standards Institute, National Accreditation Board.
And that go ahead, I'm sorry.
That accreditation body does other laboratories, not just forensic laboratories, but there is a specific group that just does forensic laboratories, and they have a set of standards that, in essence, what it is there's world standards that you have to have for laboratories, and then from there, they go down to the next level. So then there's world international standards. Then from there, they're going to break it down into what country standards, and then they're going to break it down into what science you're in. So if you're in like metallurgy or if you're in forensics, then those have a set of standards. So there's a lot of set of standards that they have that you have to follow. You have to have a certain quality assurance and control system. All of that they set forth. And if you don't produce good work or if you're not, then they won't accredit you anymore.
And does FDLE have to pay for this accreditation?
You do pay to have the service for it to them to come and actually analyze, because you are taking other firearms examiners, DNA experts, and all of them, you're taking them off of their job. So what you do is you pay for their travel, and then they can come and then they will look and they will do. So that's what you do. You're paying for them to come and evaluate you and make sure that you're good. If you are not good, so let's say they come in, they call them findings, and there is findings, you have 90 days to correct those findings. If it's a specific person, they then will evaluate that person, and then that person either gets retraining or that person will then get exterminated.
Or you just would no longer be accredited by ANAB?
You could do that, yes, but you do not want to be in an unaccredited lab, because that is proving to people that we are doing exactly what we're saying. And also, anytime you're dealing with the science, it's always good to have checks and balances. So you always want to have more research. You always want to have someone come up behind you and double check what you're doing and make sure that all of your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed. So it's always good practice to do that.
That checks and balances once a year, right?
No, the checks and balances from ANAB, yes, that is once a year. But checks and balances, every case that leaves the agency has to go through checks and balances.
All right. So let me ask you this. What sort of policies and procedures are in place, or were in place, or are in place at FDLE to deal with the issue of confirmation bias? Do you know what that is?
Yes.
What policies and procedures does FDLE have to deal with that phenomenon?
So we've had training on confirmation bias. We also, with that, I don't know what they do now. I haven't been there in a year and a half, and I know they just did a revamping of stuff. But at the time I was there, we did get training on confirmation bias and how specifically, like if someone gives you, two items, and they say these go together, and they give it to you. They say confirmation bias is now when I'm looking at these, I'm automatically saying, oh, they go together because you told me they did. However, in my 20 years of experience, there's a lot of times that people tell me these go together and they don't go together. So that's one of the things that works for us. We're like, well, this is a 9 and this is a 40, so obviously they don't go together. But we have training on that was given to us with FDLE. As far as the confirmation bias, that's also what the proficiency test does as well, because the proficiency test also will test to see exactly how you're going about your casework. And then we also have a verification process. So anytime I come to a conclusion, another trained examiner has to go behind me and verify what I did. So I could say something was an identification, and then the person could come behind me and agree with me or disagree with me. So we have to have everything checked and balanced.
So in fact, that's kind of what happened in this case. You get a case tracking form where you're given a synopsis of what the detective believed happened, right?
Yes, sometimes the case tracking form will have a description, sometimes it does not, correct.
Right. And the description that was given to you was that Mr. Murdock shot Lisa once, and that he also shot Sanda Andrews, and he asked you to process the Glock, or the handgun, the Glock handgun, for DNA. Well, actually, it was asked to be processed for touch DNA before any ballistic testings, and then you were to compare that firearm, one firearm, to the spent casings and the projectiles that were recovered at the scene of the crime, right? So that's really confirmation bias. You are getting the answers to the test prior to conducting the test, meaning they're telling you, here's a firearm, here's some casings, do they match?
Yes, that's always the question that I get in all of my cases. So it's not really confirmation bias. If they're sending in a bunch of cartridge cases, the question is, do they all go together? How many guns were involved? If they send in a bunch of bullets, it's the same thing. What type of gun could have possibly fired them? Did they all come from the same gun? How many guns were involved in the crime? If they submit a gun, obviously, what are you going to do? You're going to compare your submitted components to the gun and see if they go together. If they don't, then you're going to want to try and give information onto what the other possible gun could be. So that's just a typical, anytime we get a case with a gun, a cartridge case, and a bullet, we're going to do comparisons. That's why we're a comparative science.
Right, but you got this information prior to you conducting your analysis.
To compare all of these items?
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether or not someone said, hey, you need to compare, whether the CTF tells me to compare the gun to the bullets in the cartridge case or not. That is what my job is. My job as a firearms examiner is to determine whether or not fired ammunition components came from a firearm. So it's just actually my job. It's not really confirmation bias.
But it is. You disagree.
Wait, I'm sorry, was there a question?
I said, but it is confirmation bias, but you disagree with me.
I don't disagree if this is the items I'm given, because sometimes they give me items that don't go together. Sometimes they give me items that go together. My job is to analyze the evidence and tell what it actually is speaking, what it actually says. That's my job.
Do you know how many false positive errors you have had while working on FDLE?
None to my knowledge.
To your knowledge?
Yes.
And do you know how many misidentifications you have had while at FDLE?
None to my knowledge.
Thank you.
For the record,
I have no questions.
is this witness released?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the end of it. So we made it through kind of perfect timing, right?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 10 after 4. We're going to break for the evening. I went to a
All right. Let's see here. Let me do this. We'll put this one. Do I need to boost this? I can't remember how this courtroom is, if they're loud or quiet or annoying, or we'll just go ahead and put them up there. For those of you who don't remember Brice Rhodes, or for those of you who are new and didn't watch this one with us, Brice Rhodes is a big old hot mess. That is for sure. He was convicted of killing teenage brothers. Maurice is one of them, and Larry is the other. And he's a mess. He's an aspiring rapper out of Louisville. And the victim's mom, he had like a brief romantical entanglement with her, if you will. And he was so inappropriate in court. He got in trouble multiple times for threatening a judge. Like literally told the judge, something about like, you think I can't find out where you live? Really inappropriate. And the kids, the victims, their mom was in court, and he turned around and like blew a kiss to her. He got so bad that they ended up for his trial having to put a shock belt on him to keep him from acting up, which he didn't act up in court. And I was actually kind of disappointed by that because I really wanted to see him get shocked. But he killed these boys and had their friends, made them clean it up because he did it at his mama's house, and mama was out of town. So he made them, made them help him carry the bodies in like totes out to the car, and went and dumped their bodies, tried to burn them, and told them to clean up that mess while he was gone and to go ahead and do the dishes while they're at it because his mom was going to be back in town the next day. He is scum. So, I wanted him to act up for that sole purpose. I didn't want him to mess with the family again because that's too far. But I wanted him to like holler at an attorney or a judge or something. Just because I wanted to see him get zapped. I'll be honest. After what he did to those kids, the mama came out of me and I just wanted to see him get zapped. But it didn't happen. So who knows? Maybe it'll happen today. If, he gets a terrible sentence and knows that, which I have a feeling he will, and he knows that nothing's going to happen. But there's nothing he can do that'll change it. So, we'll see. I wouldn't be opposed to a shocking. Wouldn't be opposed to it. But did they? I don't know if they did. They didn't do death penalty in this one, did they? I can't remember. Let me see. Let's see her. It's been a while. He is facing possible life in prison. So, no DP. I didn't remember it being DP. But, yes, pass me the zapper. Zzz. You would not want me to have it. I'd be like, are you sneezing again? Psh. There will more than likely be victim impact statements. And y'all, that mama, I cannot even imagine. Cannot even imagine. And she's been known to be spicy. So we'll see what happens. Oh, that's right. That's right. Good memory. Good memory, Died at 0420. Yeah, they took DP off the table because they said that he had he didn't have the mental capacity to qualify for it. There you go.
All right, this is 16 CR 1891 Commonwealth versus Brice Rhodes. Appearances for the Commonwealth, please.
His head is still gross.
Afternoon, Your Honor. Elizabeth Jones Brown, Kirk Cunningham for the Commonwealth with Detective Aaron Tonelli from LMPD.
Thank you. And for the defense?
Ty Howard on behalf of Brice Rhodes.
And Tom Griffiths on behalf of Brice Rhodes.
Thank you all, and good afternoon, Mr. Rhodes, to you. We are on for sentencing today. A pre-sentence investigation report has been filed. Have you all had a chance to review that?
Yes, Judge.
And are there any changes or corrections that need to be noted?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. Is there anything that you would like to present before the court imposes sentence?
We have no evidence to put on today, Judge. My understanding is that the Commonwealth has evidence, and we did want to make a brief statement to the court at the conclusion.
Okay. That would be out of typical order. Do you have any objection to proceeding that way?
That's fine, Your Honor. We just have 2 victim impact statements.
All right, thank you. You may proceed, Ms. Jones.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth calls Chastity Jones.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Jones, you can come up here to the witness stand, or you can come to the podium, whichever you prefer and feel more comfortable with, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Chastity Stoner. I am the mother of Christopher Jones Jr. Christopher's was my son's dad. First, I want to just thank the court for this opportunity. I also want to, this has been crazy. This has been painful for me and my family. But what it has not done, it has not took my son down a path of destruction. So I'm thankful for that. I would love for this sentence to be upheld, because what he did is just unthinkable. No one should have to do that. On the behalf of my son and my family, we forgive, but we forgive for ourselves. We don't forgive for him. We don't feel like he's remorseful or anything like that, but I do want the court to just upheld, you know, all the sentences, and I appreciate this. I'm kind of nervous right now.
It's fine, I understand that.
It's hurtful. My son turned 18 2 days before his dad would have turned 48. He turned 18 years old. This happened when my son was 10. You just took him from my son's life. But we've persevered through some things. I'm super proud of my son, and I'm going to call that out right now, because my son got us an offer from the University of Louisville, so he's going to play football.
All right.
So this man did not take that away from him. But he did take his dad. His dad didn't see his 18th birthday. He'll be graduating May the 25th from DuPont Manual. His dad won't be there to see that. So I just wanted the court to take all of that in consideration. What he left another son behind, Byron. He left a sister, a brother behind. And for that, it angers me that somebody can just take a life. 2 brothers, that angers me, you know. So I just thank you for this opportunity, and yeah, that's all I have to say.
Well, I appreciate you being here so much. Does the defense have any questions for her?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Jones, have any questions? No. All right. You are rightfully very proud of your son. Please pass along to him that I'll be keeping my eyes out for him, and that I'm also very proud of him. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the Commonwealth?
Yes, we call Jackie Party.
Thank you.
Good for her. I'm sure that was really hard. That was the one that he
Go right ahead.
shot because he thought it was somebody else.
Been waiting 7 years, 7 long years for this day. That trial on December the 8th, on December the 18th, when they found Brice Rhodes guilty. Miss Jones was looking down. It made 3 years for that lady's death. But she was looking down on her baby to see for justice for him. And she got it. And we all got it that day.
And just to be clear, you're talking about Christopher's mom, right?
Yes, I'm talking about Christopher's mother. Yes. And for that mother to say, that mother, Mr. Jones's baby's mama's, her son is playing football. Little Larry played football. And he didn't get the chance to finish. Little Reese wanted music. And he took that from them. 14 and 16 years old. You know, I sat in this courtroom and listened to everything. Even to the coroner. Something I had kept playing in my mind all along. But the coroner confirmed it. But when that one part that he did to my grandkids, it just took me right there. How you just mutilated them like an animal. you know, and then throw White Castle boxes all around them, just like they were trash. They wasn't trash. They was a human beings, and they loved life. Little Larry and them and little Reese, they was good boys, very good boys. They went to school, everything, you know. It's just, I just can't understand why and how he can just take Mr. Jones's life, a man walking down the street, and just take his life like it's nothing. You know, but God say vengeance is man's, who says the Lord. Because, you know, I do go to church. I'm in church. I've been in church all my life. And that's where I raised my kids in, church. But I do want to say this. I would like to have a copy of his medical records over across the bridge and over here too. For my son. Little Larry and them's dead. Little Larry's dead is going through this really hard. Because he's not here to help, wasn't here to protect his own child because of another judge in Christian County. Wasn't here to protect his child. Neither one of his children. But you know, the things that I wanted to say to Mr. Rhodes, it was somebody in my house that knew him. In school. And this came about. And this man told me that he knew him while they was in school. Said he was a nicest guy, quiet, played football. And he just couldn't believe the way he turned out. And you know, and I was just stunned when this guy told me this. I didn't even know this guy. He was doing some work. And it just came about. But I do hope he finds, so you can find the Lord in anywhere. Anywhere. And I hope he do find Jesus. While he's in the prison and not in jail. It's a difference. But I don't know. You know, I don't know. But I just know for little Larry and little Reese not to be here. When little Larry was born, I was there when little Larry was born. Weighed 7 pounds and 11 ounces. And not to even there to protect my own baby, my babies. But I don't know.
There are not perfect words for this situation. I think that you've done a great job of speaking for Larry and Maurice, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness?
No, Judge.
Thank you. Any other witnesses for the criminal?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Griffiths.
Judge, given the trial that we all were present for, that we all sat through and we all did our job, we understand the court doesn't really have discretion to deviate from the jury's verdict in a situation like this. The jury handed down a sentence, and we understand the court is going to impose that sentence. We do believe that by operation of law that those sentences should run concurrent. We would ask the court to impose them concurrently, and we do intend to file an appeal in this case. And that's our statement for the court.
Thank you. Ms. Jones-Brown, does the Commonwealth wish to have any response in regards to the request that the sentences run concurrently by law?
Judge, I think that's the way the law works, but we would ask the court to follow the recommendation of the jury as to each count of murder being life without the possibility of parole. I think they will merge into a concurrent sentence, but nevertheless, he will not be eligible for parole. And I know everybody here remembers the whole trial and knows why that is appropriate, and we would ask the court to follow that.
All right. The attorneys are correct that the court does not have discretion to run these sentences anything but concurrent. The reason for that is multiple, but particularly because in Kentucky, a life sentence without the opportunity of probation or parole really means that. And so obviously, you can't have life upon life upon life. There's only one life here we're talking about, and that's Mr. Rhodes' life. I will tell you all that this has been by far one of the most tragic cases I've ever been involved in. And as someone who has represented many people charged with murder myself, and having been involved in a lot of tragic cases, this one it really stands out for how profoundly sad it is on every level. With Mr. Jones, it's just the fact that it wasn't even the right person that they thought they were looking for is so profoundly sad. With Maurice and Larry, the fact that they were so young is so sad. It's so sad that the police had to resort to sending out sketches before anyone realized that they were gone and identified them. That is tragic. Tragic. And that deserves being said. Everything about this case is horrific. And when I came on the bench, it was very important to me to get this case tried, to get a resolution for everyone on both sides. It needed to be done. And I am satisfied that it is done and it is over and that justice has been served and that the jury was in the absolute best position to determine what the appropriate sentence should be. And that this jury worked very hard and very emotionally to come to what they felt was a just verdict. I believe it would be a dishonor to change that in any way. And so the court will follow the recommendation of the jury in line with the law and impose a sentence of life without parole. Is there anything else for today? All right, thank you all.
Judge, can we approach?
Sure. On or off record? Okay.
Life without parole.
Don't want white noise.
The only issue.
That was hard. It's victim impact statements are always really difficult. And what the judge said too about the fact that he when he killed him, he didn't even kill the right guy. If you did not watch with us, basically the story is that there was a hit put out on a guy in the neighborhood area, whatever. And so Brice and some of his friends, I guess, decided to go find this guy who had a hit on him and kill him to get the money. So he has these, two teenage boys with him who look up to him and they're riding around. And then there's also, they had other people too, who also testified. But he goes to try to find this guy who has the hit out on him, and he sees Christopher in the street, or like on the sidewalk or whatever, actually, I think is what it was, and sees him, and he's like, oh, that's him, and, you know, riding by and shoots and kills him. Father of two. Wasn't even the right guy. Was not even the right guy. So, obviously, that's... I mean... Could you imagine that? You know, I can't even, I don't even want to imagine, like, the pain that family feels, you know, totally innocent. Because the two young boys were with him when it happened, he apparently, look at this guy. It's messing up. Apparently, he believed that they were talking about it or told, you know, their mom or family or whatever. So he decided that they needed to also die since they were witnesses. So he basically got them to, you know, come hang out, and went to his mom's house. And the story is incredibly painful and sad. He killed them one at a time, tied them up, and one of the brothers was in the bathroom while the other one was being killed, and so he had to hear it. And I mean, it's just, it's, the brutality of it is, I don't even have words. It's awful. I can't, it's one of those that just makes you sick to your stomach. The life without parole is 3 sentences, but they are running concurrently because she said that that's the law, the way that the law is set up there. So it will be concurrent. Yes, breathe, breathe. Danielle, welcome to the family. We're happy to have you. Welcome. What are you jumping for? She just jumped like bed to the couch.
To testify.
Ooh, those are really hard. All right. We had I get teary talking about it. We have get it together. We had one of the mom's friends in here with us when we were streaming it. So, which is interesting. Oh, okay. Let's see. David Marshall Murdock. Let's find. Is there not a day 3? ML, thank you for gifting a membership. Thank you. It went to Kelly P. Look good and green. Okay, get it together. Is David Murdock not in trial today? A half day today? A half day. Oh, are they coming in the afternoon? Because I don't see... I don't see them at all. Let's see. I see day 2. Here, let me just pull up. Judge said ending around 1. It's not even, I don't see it on at all. Unless I'm crazy. Oh. By the way. Look, this is Sanda. Mildred, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, thank you. I vote for a palate cleanse after that. Too sad. It is, isn't it? I don't even see our trial anyway. So... let me see what I can find. Oh, here we go. Oh, they got... 911 calls. Oh. Oh, apparently he's crying in court. Emotional day in court. Look at this one. This is from Wednesday. So I guess they would be in court then, right? I don't know why we don't see it. There were visible swings of contrasting emotions during the start of testimony at first-degree murder trial of David Marshall Murdock on Monday. Emotions ranged from the love and happiness Murdock shared with his slain ex-girlfriend at the start of their romance to tears from the defendant and others in the courtroom as the crime scene photos and a 911 call were presented to the jury by the prosecution. Look at him crying. You don't get... you don't get to cry. During the first day of his trial, the jury saw graphic autopsy photos. Holly Mack gifted membership. It went to Karina Bowman. Thank you, Holly Mack. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Yes, that other one was the, Sanda was the other woman that he shot. The one he shot in the face. The friend. Let's see. To the first trial, the jury saw graphic autopsy photos, including bullet wounds to Bunce's hand, pants, underwear, and bra. The photo also showed a bullet hole inside her chest cavity that damaged her internal organs. They did the 911 call. There she is again. That's a strong lady to get up there and be able to testify and be like, it was him that shot me in the face and killed my best friend. That's strong. Circuit Judge Kevin Abdany allowed a 10-minute break for the defendant to regain his composure following the emotional display. He hid his tearful eyes from the jury and hid his face behind the lapel of his jacket. Well, he should be hiding his face. So I don't know if they're there's 2 days ago. Oh, somebody in the hall just screamed. Danielle, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is the most welcoming chat I've ever been in, and I'm in many. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We have a great chat here. We have such a great group. I love our group here. They are amazing. Watch live. What day is this? I don't see it. So I wonder if they didn't. It's crying. Oops. Let's see. Oh, Amy Lee gifted a membership. Amy Lee. It went to Helena J. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Ryan Noah, David Murdock trial. I don't know. I don't know why it's not. David Murdock. Let's see. Lisa's dreaming about her new life in Hollywood. I'm not moving to Hollywood. Let's see here. Am I crazy? I don't see it. So they may not have it out here today. Live. All I see is the one from yesterday. So maybe that's a sign. Danielle gifted 5 memberships. Thank you, thank you. It went to Ned Smith, Wendy Sponseller, Kenny Peterson, LJ, C. Cheney. Welcome to the green side. Welcome, welcome. I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Well, if we don't have trial to show, oh, that reminds me. Did y'all know, this is disturbing, you know, we had talked about doing the bathtub murder trial originally, but we were so far behind we didn't do it. Figure we do a live trial. Do you know that I was looking into, when I was originally thinking about doing that one, I was looking into some stuff on it, and I looked up the victim's Facebook, and 2 days before her murder, I think it was 2 days, maybe 3 days. Anyway, a couple days before her murder, she posted, have y'all seen that meme that said, just know if I was ever murdered, I was, talking trash till the bitter end? She posted that just a couple days before her murder, which is really sad, but it also kind of seemed like it showed her spunk, I guess. Sad. I take my chair to the podcast. No, it's not my podcast. It's like it's just my it's my Conspiracy in Canton podcast. They're wanting to talking about making a TV series out of it. It's on Law and Crime. I don't see it on Law and Crime. Let me look. Somehow I missed it. I see shooter's dad on trial and yeah, I don't see it. And trooper's wife, but no Murdock. Yes, I am going to CrimeCon. I will be there. Be there with bells on. I went last year and it was awesome. Yeah, they're at closings for that one. Seems like it went by pretty fast, right? I feel like it did. I don't see it either. But they also didn't show the opening statements. They released it later. So it might be one of those things that they released later. It's on Law and Crime Trials. Y'all, I am on Law and Crime Trials, and look. I'm on here. The only one that's live is the Trooper bathtub trial. They have day 1 right here, day 2 right here. They don't have day 3. Yes, that is how we met. And now, besties. Yep, Carrie Rawson introduced us because we both knew Carrie, and it was the first night they did like the intro party, and Carrie was running late, and we were all like in a group text, I think. So when we got there, we were like trying to find each other. So that's how Jessica and I became friends. It was a good time. We had a good time. We got to meet some cool people. I love you too. We had fun. It'll be fun again this year. It's cool to see how much, what a positive impact it had. I think that being able to talk to like we talked to Gabby Petito's family, and so many people that have been impacted by their own, really tough crime stories and things that have happened, and Jessica included, things that I think having people who have been through something so traumatic, because that's not something that I can relate to, but I know having a lot of the people that there together that have gone through some of these things. I know that there was a sense of like not being alone with some of that, or being understood with some of that from what I've been told. So I think that part's cool. But then also having that group there and having like content creators like me, like, you know, being able to hear from those people, it really gives you like a perspective into their thoughts and feelings and how, you know, how it impacts them. And I think it makes us as creators want to make sure that we are very victim focused and, you know, so interesting. Yeah. Jessica says, I got to connect with so many other survivors. CrimeCon made sure it's respectful to victims' families. I appreciated that. Yeah. That was one of the, like, most kind of heartwarming, I guess, things that I saw about it. So it was good. It's going to be in Nashville this year. Oh, speaking of Nashville, did you see, since we don't have our trial, let me pull up this before we finish. Have you seen all of this stuff with let me find it. With the missing college kid? I posted a few things. Nashville police say this surveillance video. All right, look at this. It's too early to go. Y'all don't like for me to have an early day, do you? All right. See this. Okay, so University of Missouri student missing 4 days after being kicked out of a Nashville bar. So apparently he was really drunk, was kicked out of a bar. There are multiple videos showing like where he's like stumbling around. There's one where he falls, but he's now missing. So it says Nashville police are searching for a University of Missouri student who went missing Friday after last being seen at a downtown bar in the Tennessee city. Riley Strain is his name, 22-year-old senior at Mizzou, was visiting Nashville for the weekend and disappeared after he and his friends were kicked out of the bar that night. One of his friends, identified by his first name, Braden, told the news station that he tried looking for Strain in the immediate aftermath of his disappearance. Officials say that Braden also attempted to find Strain using the locations feature on Snapchat, but was unable to see his friend in the area, most recently reported by the app at that time. Calls made out to Strain's cell phone went to voicemail after he went missing, and a police search of the area around a cell tower where Strain's phone last pinged was not successful either. The area where his phone pinged is less than 2 miles from the bar in downtown Nashville, where he was last seen. He's 6'5". I mean, he's 6'5". He's not hard to. You would think that would be hard to lose, a 6'5" dude. Like 6'5" tall with blue eyes and light brown hair, according to a description released by the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department. They shared 2 photos of missing student along with their description and noted in social media posts shared Monday and Tuesday that officers were continuing to search for him. Nashville police released video footage on Tuesday that showed Strain with a small group crossing First Avenue to Gay Street. That intersection is several blocks from the bar. He's seen in the footage wearing a brown button-up shirt with darker sleeves and a matching dark front pocket. So this is him. I mean, you can see he crosses Look at him cross. He almost like runs right into that. You can see him. He's stumbling. I mean, you can tell he is super drunk. So that's going on too. Yeah, they're searching the river now. So sad. I mean, you like, there was one video that I saw too. Let me see if I can find it. It's like, okay, see, this is the thing. It's like he's drugged, kind of drunk. And that's something that has been said too, that he's, that there have been multiple accounts of people, men in the area of Broadway that have been drugged recently. Let's see what else they have. There were other... All right, here's another one. Let me start this over. I'm trying to hide this because I don't want my notifications coming up necessarily. All right, so this is another one. Nashville Police released new video showing missing student crossing the street. So here's another one. Oh, wait, that's the same one. Hold on. That's not the one I wanted to show you. Hold, please. All right, here's this part. All right, see, this is 2nd Avenue and Church Street. And see him walking like hunched over. He just grabbed the wall. I mean, he can barely function. So it's really sad. You know, it makes me scared too. Like, you know, my kid is close to that age. Like, how old did they say he was? My kid will be 21 this year. And he was out with his friends last night. And so I was looking at this morning and I'm texting my kid at like, I checked his location first. Don't tell him. We're only supposed to check in emergencies, but it's an emergency because there's a missing kid in Nashville. So I checked his location first and I was like, okay, he's, 2 miles down the road is what it shows. But he's at condos that I don't know, but I know that his friends are in town. So technically I do know why he's there. But still, that's not the point. I'm a scared mama. So I was like texting my kid at like 6 o'clock this morning, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, that stuff is scary. Let's see if there were more. I don't remember. Oh, here's the other one. I thought there was one more. Okay, here's the other video. Yeah, he went with friends. Look at him. Okay, this is where he falls. See, he's running, and then he just falls. And he's down for a minute. I got in a fight with my ex in that parking lot. Just random. So he's down for a minute, and then you could see him kind of get up and still stumbling around. Here, let me... Oh. This is the other one we saw already. He got kicked out of the bar, and from what I read, they put him out the back door, and his friends had to pay the tab. So by the time they finished paying the tab and tried to go find him, he was gone. They couldn't find him. So it makes me wonder, was there some kind of awful accident? Obviously, you can tell by the way he's walking, he doesn't know what world he's in at this point. So was he drugged? Was he just overserved? Was he, you know, I don't know. But it's scary. I would think he would definitely have been lost, because I mean, could you imagine trying to find your way around when you're in a city that you don't know anything about, and you're like 3/4 completely gone? Probably more than 3/4 at this point. The back door thing bothers me, because if they were on Broadway, it's hard to get lost on Broadway, because it's, I mean, everything, especially like, you know, in the evenings, they'll close it down. So people are just walking, you know, everywhere. So if they had put him out the front door, it's harder to get lost, I would think. But I mean, I know hindsight's 20/20. But it's just, it's so scary. But I know that they are saying that he was drunk, but there have been reports of, you know, young men in the area being drugged. It makes me, I mean, you can't, with something like this, you just can't help but wonder about all possibilities. It's just really sad. If they had lost him that night, and yeah, I mean, I could see, you know, drunk college days, like waking up in a park or something, you know, if he had found, like, but yeah, it's just, it's sad. So I don't know. Very sad. Oh, Lucy's back. Lucy's back in her seat. All right, well, I guess, let me look one more time just to see if they have it. I don't think they do. Yeah, I don't see it. So even if they do it now, it's late. I want to go. It's beautiful outside. I think this is God's sign for me to sign off and enjoy the rest of my day and get some sunshine. Take Miss Lucy to the beach and read a book. Sounds fun to me. I appreciate you. I appreciate y'all so much. Is RA still live? I can portal everybody over there. Yeah, he's live. Let me do that. Let's portal. Portal on over. And remember when this used to take me forever because I could never remember how to do it, and I was like, there's so many steps, I don't know what I'm doing. And now look at me go. All right, I got it set up. So we will portal over there, and I am going to go enjoy the beach. Thank y'all so much. Thank you for hanging out. It was a good day. Thank you. I'm excited. We'll see how it goes. I haven't signed any contracts yet, but we'll see how it goes. All right, y'all. I appreciate it. I will see you tomorrow. We will probably start a little bit later in the day, because I've been liking having my morning time. I'm not gonna lie. So, thank y'all so much for hanging out with me. I love you all. Thank you for reporting to jury duty. I'll see you tomorrow.
I gotta go. I can't stick around here forever.
Everybody was wonderful. Everybody behaved. Everybody's always so nice to me.
Just love your channel and
Goodbye.